Good morning. I'd like to call to order the December MTA Board Meeting, which is being held jointly with the Metro-North Railroad and Long Island Railroad Committee, New York City Transit Committee, Bridges and Tunnels Committee, Finance Committee, Diversity Committee, Corporate Governance Committee, and Capital Program Oversight Committee. We are conducting this meeting remotely via Zoom and conference call. Governor Cuomo's Executive Order 202.1, which has subsequently been extended, suspends the open meetings law requirements, and accordingly any provisions in the MTA bylaws regarding public attendance at meetings and board members participating and voting by phone are also suspended. Now I'd like to ask Tom Quigley, our General Counsel, to do the official roll call for the record. Tom.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Board members, I will now do the official roll call in alphabetical order. When I call your name, please verbally indicate your presence and make sure your microphone is not on mute. Chairman Foy is in attendance. Commissioner Albert.
Present.
Commissioner Barbas.
Present.
Commissioner Borelli. Commissioner Borelli. Commissioner Brown.
Present.
Commissioner Calisi.
Present.
Commissioner Cortez Vasquez. Commissioner Cortez Vasquez. Commissioner Fleischer.
Present.
Commissioner Glucksman.
Present.
Commissioner Herman.
Present.
Commissioner Jones.
Present.
Commissioner Lacewell.
Present.
Commissioner Law.
Here.
Commissioner Lynn.
Present.
Commissioner Mack.
He's on his way up.
Commissioner Mahaltas.
I'm here. Good morning.
Commissioner Mojica.
Present.
Commissioner Samuelson.
I'm here.
Commissioner Schwartz. Commissioner Schwartz. Commissioner Tessitore.
I'm here.
Commissioner Zuckerman.
Here.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Tom. Later in this meeting, agency presidents and staff will submit procurements and actions for a vote. Your presence at this meeting and silence at the time of a vote will be considered an affirmative vote for the record. If you would like to vote no or abstain, please state your name and your vote. We will now move into our virtual comment period. As with the prior months, speakers were able to register on Monday and send in their comments by video. We'll play public comments now for 30 minutes and make the full public comment video available online.
Good morning, everyone. We have 22 members of the public registered to speak today. The first 30 minutes of public comment will be delivered at the board meeting, and the remainder will be posted online for the public and board members on Wednesday, December the 16th. I would like to remind our public speakers that in the interest of time and fairness to all speakers, we limit everyone to 2 minutes. Please be aware that there will be a warning beep to remind you that you have 30 seconds to conclude your remarks. Thank you for your patience and understanding throughout the virtual public comment session. Our first speaker is Assemblymember Robert Carroll.
Good afternoon. I'm Assemblymember Robert Carroll, and I'm glad to be here and be able to testify to the MTA board. I think it is imperative that over the next 6 months to a year, as New York comes out of the COVID-19 pandemic, that we see no additional fare increases or service cuts to our buses and subways. I believe service cuts and fare increases would create a death spiral and send the 30% of strap hangers who are currently using the MTA fleeing to other modes of transportation. This will make it more difficult for the state and federal government to find future funds for the MTA to shore up its budget because of anemic ridership. What the MTA needs and should do right now is continue to work with our partners in Washington and in Albany to come up with additional revenue streams to shore up the MTA's budget and to make sure that when a vaccine has been widely distributed and New York is ready to reopen, that the MTA service is there to meet customers, tourists, and everyone else who uses it. It is then when we can start having long-term discussions about fares, service, but only then when we know that New York is on the road to recovery. So I urge you to, again, continue to keep working with partners in Washington and Albany to find those additional revenue streams or additional abilities to borrow, and do not raise the fare, do not cut service. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Councilmember Idanis Rodriguez.
Thank you, Chairman Bob Foy and the rest of the team on the board, the MTA, for the job that you do, your dedication to run the largest public transportation system in the whole nation and the second one in the world. I think that, as I have said before in previous board meeting, we're going through a tough time. I know that you have to deal with this situation about a big gap and deficit that you have to address. At the same time that we are in the middle of this pandemic, at the same time that we hope to see the new administration, Biden and Harris, and the leadership of Senator Schumer, the Democratic Congressional Caucus, understanding that we need to provide the MTA the financial support that it is necessary to bring from DC. So I would like to ask you to do the best you can, and also I would like to ask Governor Cuomo, with the influence that he also had as a person that appointed the chairman, everyone, to please hold any plan to bring any fare increase. I think that January is going to be very important for everyone. With the new administration, I hope that the DC will listen and provide the resources that you need. I hope that also you and the rest of the leadership of the MTA will be able to look at radar and work with the private sector to bring more revenue. So let's work together, stop any effort to raise any fare, and let's get funding from federal, from DC. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Congresswoman-elect Nicole Malliotakis.
Hi, it's Nicole Malliotakis, New York State Assembly Member and Congresswoman-elect for New York's 11th District, representing Staten Island and Southern Brooklyn. I do want to take this opportunity to address the board briefly. I'll keep my remarks brief because I already testified at the MTA hearing a couple of weeks ago against increasing tolls and fares on our community. But I do want to reiterate just how important the Staten Island Resident Discount Program is. After all, it was created decades ago because Staten Island is the only community, the only borough that has to pay to connect to the rest of the city. In addition, the MTA has always used this bridge as a cash cow. If you look at the revenue generated on the bridge, it's about $500 million, $500 million annually, roughly. And that is much more than it takes to actually maintain the Verrazano Bridge. In fact, majority of the money is actually going to subsidize other parts of the MTA network. So we feel that we already contribute greatly to the revenue needed for the MTA for other parts of the system. But in addition to that, with two-way split tolling that is happening now, the MTA is expected to generate an additional $12 million in revenue annually, and that should offset any need to reduce our discount or take it away. So I just want to reiterate just how important it is to our community that we maintain that discount. I'm looking forward to work with you and alternative options to help fund the system or look for savings, and I've been meeting with your senior legislative staff. Appreciate your time. Please leave the discount as is.
Our next speaker is Tony Utano.
Good morning, Chairman Boyd, agency presidents, and board members. I'm Tony Utano, president of the Transport Workers Union, Local 100. That's right. I'm joined in our union hall by Local 100's top officers and other union leaders. Mark Henry, the president of ATU Local 1056 in Queens. Yeah. Danny Casella, the president of ATU 726 in Staten Island. And John Cleary, Chairman of ATU Local 1181, representing President Mike Cordiello. I'm also speaking on behalf of Anthony Simon, General Chairperson of Association of Sheet Metal, Air, and Transportation Workers, the largest Long Island Railroad union. Anthony could not be here today. Together, we represent the overwhelming majority of your employees.
That's right. We're united.
We are united,
That's
and we want to make one thing absolutely clear.
Come on.
The MTA will be making a grave mistake
That's right.
if it moves forward with layoffs.
Right.
This year, next year, or any year.
That's right.
After all, we have endured and sacrificed layoffs.
That's right.
It would be an unforgivable act of betrayal.
That's right.
The MTA would likely wind up with a grassroots workers' rebellion.
That's right.
It would be impossible to contain.
We're ready. That's right.
As you know, thousands of us became sick
Come on.
because we couldn't work from home.
That's
131 died. Layoffs need to be taken off the table now.
That's right.
It appears that you will not adopt today the previous proposed budget with extreme service cuts and layoffs. We believe that it is the right decision.
That's right.
There are strong indications that federal funding for mass transit is coming.
It's coming.
It may come in the final days of the Trump administration or early in the
It's coming.
Biden-Harris administration.
Yes.
Either way, it is
Find that
important
money.
to recognize right now
That's
that
right.
the system needs more than a federal one-shot.
That's right.
It needs new streams of recurring revenues.
That's right.
And we need to press for financial assistance both in Washington and Albany.
That's right.
Ending the
Find it.
stock transfer rebate and redirecting revenues to mass transit would be a good start.
Absolutely. Find that money.
Make no mistake, we will continue to fight for short-term and
And
long-term
long-term, that's right.
federal funding.
That's right.
We will keep fighting for the state to create new streams of revenues to support the MTA. But we will also fight any effort to pink slip the heroic transit workers, putting everything on the line for New York.
Our next speaker is Andy Pollack.
Thank you, Lucille. Good morning, Chairman Foy. Morning, members of the board. Today, I want to do something positive and give my praise to Chief Development Officer Jano Lieber. During this pandemic, the MTA has been able to accomplish a lot of construction projects, and the one that I have been anticipating, one of them to be specific, is the elevator at Greenpoint Avenue in Brooklyn. In 2021, I will be paying a visit over there to take a look at the elevators for myself, but this is a big first step for the G line, a line in the system that has never had an elevator before. However, there is one flaw at Court Square 23rd Street. How come an elevator was not proposed over there? Yet the 7 above ground has an elevator. And I also want to mention the fact that not only is Greenpoint Avenue a good first step for the G, but Metropolitan Avenue was also proposed last year. Also, I would expect an elevator to be done at Classen Avenue and Hoyt-Skimmerhorn streets in the future. So, General Lieber, keep up the good work. I'm looking forward to more progress in 2021. Thank you all very much. Happy holidays. I will see you all in the new year. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Jason Anthony.
Good morning, Lucille, and good morning, everyone. Board. Jason Anthony, Vice President of Passengers United. I see several elected officials attending the meeting. Instead of speaking in the meeting, you guys should be taking the subway to 34th Street Penn Station and then taking Amtrak to Union Station, and then from there, walk to Capitol Hill to meet with your peers in DC to come up with a compromise. Because you guys in these meetings, you take up time that activists like me and Passengers United have time for. But COVID-19 is in the rise again. I've been hearing that bus drivers, subway conductors are receiving complaints that their colleagues are testing positive to COVID-19. I wonder what Patrick, Joseph Foy, and Sarah Elizabeth Feinberg are going to do about this. Sarah, we have been asking you for an answer for the past 3 months. We haven't got an answer. Please, don't be a shady person and answer to our tweets, because if not, you will have to resign or get fired, because we're not gonna accept you being inactive as interim chair of New York City Transit. We had enough.
Please conclude your remarks.
I will conclude my remarks right now, Lucille. But bottom line, we need to be more proactive in saving our colleagues.
Please conclude your remarks. Thank you. Our next speaker is Matt Camper.
Good morning, MTA Board. My name is Matt Camper, and I am the Long Island Regional Director for Passengers United. I'm here to talk about the 2021 budget. And, obviously, we are in a financial situation that we have never seen in the history of the MTA, even going back to the financial crisis in the 1940s. I understand what is going on, and I understand that things need to get done. But there needs to be other solutions to the problem other than making us riders have to pay more every single time. And I mean it seriously, every single time. We should not have to pay more. There are other solutions to this problem, and finding ways to deficit the financial situation, such as two proposals that I'm going to say right now. Both of them involve working with the state legislator, including the state Senate, the state assembly, and the governor, Andrew Cuomo. And we feel at Passengers United, and there has been a lot of talk about this, we feel that there needs to be some sort of gas and millionaires tax implemented to help the MTA and to help upstate roads and potentially even transportation systems across the state. This is a good way for us to be able to sustain ourselves, as if the stimulus package is not passed in Washington, which I'm really hoping this week it will, that may not be the solution to the problem. And
please conclude your remarks. Thank you.
Cannot help us, and I'm really hoping that the state can help us by implementing that. So that's it. Thank you so much.
Our next speaker is Charlton De Souza.
Good morning. This is Charlton De Souza, President of Passengers United. And number one, first and foremost, we need a gas tax. We need a millionaire's tax. And we also need no fare increase. That is so important to essential, hardworking people who are going out there on the front lines every day. Our federal government needs to step up, but our state leaders and our governor needs to tax the rich. Asking people to pay for a fare increase at a time when so many are unemployed is not the way to go. And also, we need unlimited Metro cards kept. In terms of the Long Island Railroad, there should be no flat fares. And the reason why I say that is because flat fares, Nassau County residents are actually paying more than Suffolk County residents. And also Queens residents are paying more, which doesn't make any sense. So for the Long Island Railroad, we need city ticket, we need Atlantic ticket kept, and we also need no bus and service cuts. And that's one thing that's not mentioned on the MTA's website. We're being asked to pay more, but what's going to happen when the service cuts are going to be released? how many bus routes are going to be eliminated. So we need express bus routes kept, especially in areas where there is no subway or commuter rail service. And in terms of COVID-19, we need protections for MT workers and passengers. And the $50 mask fine should be enforced for all passengers. If you don't have a mask, you should be either taken off the system or your name should be recorded by the police so they can medically track you. The health department can track that person to see if they're infected, and they should also be taking people's temperatures on the subway and commuter rail stations. Thank you so much.
Our next speaker is Shin-Si Wu.
Good morning, MTA board members. So I'm just an ordinary New Yorker, and I have been living in New York City area for more than 3 years. And one thing I really appreciate about New York City since I moved here is that it has excellent public transit. And I think it is one of the features that make New York City livable. So, and especially during this coronavirus pandemic, we are seeing that the MTA workers as well as many other essential workers are taking a lot of risk, helping us to take care of the city. So I think it's only fair that when we are thinking about budget decisions, we also have them in mind. Like we need to work with them and make sure that their needs are also met when we are making whatever decisions. For example, cutting jobs in MTA, and also cutting service to the most vulnerable communities. I think during the pandemic it's really not a good idea. So yeah, thank you.
Our next speaker is Sean Petty.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sean Petty. I'm a registered nurse. I work in the health and hospitals system. I've been a pediatric emergency room nurse in the Bronx for 13 years. I'm speaking today in two distinct and related capacities as both a public health advocate and as a public sector worker. It's difficult to contain and express my outrage at the idea that it is even being considered that during this world historic pandemic, there will be cuts to both one of the most critical components of our economy in this city, which is the public sector workforce, and one of the most critical components of our infrastructure, which is the public transit system. The public transit system has played a critical role in safely ferrying essential workers that get to grocery stores, food distribution facilities, healthcare facilities. And the only way it's been able to be somewhat safe is because people have been able to be socially distanced in a somewhat uncrowded way throughout this time. And the idea that there's going to be cuts to the tune of 9,000 workers is just patently insane. We've had, as public sector workers, we've made ungodly sacrifices. Over 100 transit workers have died. Nurses by the dozens have died. Our families have died. Our families have gotten sick. And now those same people are being asked to economically sacrifice while billionaires have made collectively over $1 trillion during this year alone. This is absolutely cannot happen. I will do everything in my power as a nurse, as an elected leader in NYSNA, as a fellow public sector worker to make sure that this does not happen. And there's other revenue sources. There are 14 bills in Albany right now that can be passed that would take care of this.
Please conclude your remarks, sir. Thank you.
And that is what has to happen. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Elon Berman.
First of all, it is an honor to meet you all. First thing I will say is, please change the rule about playing the first 30 minutes of the comments. Everybody deserves to be heard at these meetings, not just the first 30 minutes. People show up to these meetings to be heard, and they should not have to waste their breath for absolutely no reason just to find out that they were bumped out. Most importantly, I am very worried about the transit cuts you have planned if there is no federal funding. A lot of people depend on New York Transit to get to their jobs and to anywhere they want to go. Your plan of cutting 40% of the buses and the subways and cutting 50% of the Long Island Railroad and the Metro North will kill New York completely, and it will kill the environment completely. I'm very confident that Joe Biden will give the MTA the federal funding they need to keep New York Transit running 100%. But in case you never get the federal funding, you really need to have a whole new plan instead of cutting anything from New York Transit. If you plan on cutting anything from New York Transit, you will definitely be in a much worse situation than your budget crunch, and you will put us in a terrible and devastating and depressing situation if you let these transit cuts go through. New Jersey is doing a gas tax, and they are raising taxes on the rich, the millionaires, and the billionaires, just so their transit keeps running 100%. New York must do the same thing to save the transit. It is much worse to cut half of the busiest transportation system in the country and to kill the environment than to have rich people pay a penny. Cutting anything from New York Transit, especially during a pandemic, is a terrible idea. I know ridership is dropping, but that does not mean that there will never be overcrowding. Please have a whole new plan instead of cutting anything from New York Transit. Transit plays a very important role in New York, and it holds New York together. Without transit, New York will die. Please have a whole new plan instead of cutting anything from New York Transit. All of New York Transit must
Please conclude your remarks. Thank you.
All of New York Transit must be saved. Thank you very much for hearing me out.
Our next speaker is Yuki Endo.
나는 이스유견의 Jackson things are they just with the weekend nation shutdown once again in January 2021 for no shuttle buses provided between Hicks New Hyde Park is a nice bus cost cornering Long Island ticket Nino other Hicks Nino other Hempstead. I am arguing to provide a shuttle bus for mainline customers because they are already suffering from a pandemic mainline shutdown with no train or shuttle bus service. Nice bus is now connecting train service and does not have a bike lock. Please for sake of the mainline customers' Christmas, I get Long Island data president free and channel pathway as a Long Island data PC AC today the nice bus 22 24 bus and a winked. We can one way between Hicks in order to see how long a bus takes compared to Long Island data shuttle bus. I get a channel pathway not to be a green for essential work on a mainline and provide shuttle bus by shuttle bus NT buses as well. Not beside nice bus. Thank you for your cooperation.
Our next speaker is Alita Dupree.
Good morning, Board Chair Pat Foy and members. Alita Dupree for the record. My pronouns are she and her. It's good to be here. I have some new Omni fare gates behind me from Union Square, so thank you for your continued work with Omni. We're almost done with the subway, so I look forward to the news and moving on to the next steps. You know, I love a good public meeting. Can't seem to get enough of them. Meetings are not just necessary, but they can be fun as well. So thank you. I appreciate the work with Greenpoint Station. I did get to catch some of the press conference. So we have a very good voice in Victor Calisi serving on your board. The MTA board is one of the most diverse boards that I know of. So that's definitely an asset. And I'm also catching up on your hate has no place in our transportation system. This is very important work that must always continue. And Grand Central Terminal was obviously the ideal place to launch that initial presentation. And it's not just a message for Grand Central or the subway or even New York City, but a very important message for the world. So I appreciate that. And I would like to see some permanence in our NYC Transit Leadership. Some may disagree with me, but I think Sarah Feinberg would be good at this type of work in leading New York City Transit into the future on a permanent basis. And again, Grand Central is important. Let's not forget about our legendary traditions and history. The future of our system must never be in question, but always relevant to the future. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Lisa Daglian.
Greetings, I'm Lisa Daglian, Executive Director of the Permanent Citizens Advisory Committee to the MTA, PCAC. Today, you'll be voting on the MTA's 2021 budget. We don't envy the difficult decisions you'll be making that are largely due to the stalemate in Washington. The impact of lawmakers' inability to come to agreement on a stimulus package that addresses the needs of transit agencies will be felt by riders and economies, not just in New York, but across the United States. Hopefully, consensus on some relief will be reached in the coming days, and we thank our elected leadership, including Senator Schumer, for their efforts to make it happen. We look forward to having a friend of transit in the White House and the new and improved dynamic that will bring. Despite the gaping gap, we're dismayed that the budget you are voting on includes a 4% yield fare increase. We hope that everyone's testimony will be considered, including those who will testify on December 21st, before any decisions are made. We understand that in typical times we'd be due for a biennial increase, but these are not typical times. It's unfair to make those of us who have never left or have come back to transit pay for the losses in revenue from those who have not. We urge you to table the fare increase. Instead, look at other ways to fill the hole as we await help from Washington. Have you considered a higher increase for tolls while holding riders harmless? Toll revenue is rising as more people turn to driving. Ridership is still low and expected to remain that way for years to come. Raising fares will only push more people into cars, especially with looming service cuts. We should be looking at ways to incentivize transit ridership while reducing congestion and pollution. We understand that service cuts are not up for discussion at this meeting, but that it's critical that any reductions in service, any right sizing, essentially a service cut, be accompanied by public hearings, and that public input be a real consideration before any decisions are made. Transparency engenders trust. It's more important than ever that riders trust the MTA so they get back on board. Thank you, happy holidays, and happy New Year.
Our next speaker is Andy Quito.
Hello, guys. Good afternoon. My name is Andy Quito, and I'm here to speak about the incoming catastrophic budget cuts. You guys are proposing things to like help save the MTA, but the thing that will save the MTA for sure is you got to follow what New Jersey's doing. You know, get the millionaire tax passed, the gas tax. No, we need to tax the rich. We cannot be doing plans like cutting service or even what's that? Put in a fee to collect the mail, a package. That's not fair. That's just gonna drive people to just pick up their package from there. That's one of the most idiotic thing that I ever heard. Just to save the MTA, a tax for picking up package delivered to your house, and then we're gonna get to mask policy. It's not being enforced, and those people that do not wear the mask on the subway should be taken off, put them in jail, or I think the fine should be raised to at least $500 for those not wearing the mask, because cases are going up. Each time while I'm on the subway, on the railroad, I see people with no mask on, which is just unbelievable. People just do not follow the rules, and there needs to be huge consequences. And like what my other previous speaker said, you should write their name down and have the health officials come to your house and get them tested for COVID. And one last thing, please fix up Jamaica Center. The situation's out of control over there. You guys don't even care about that either. I speak every single time about it, and nothing gets done. And also fares. You guys never mention about fares. What's going to happen with fares during this budget thing that you guys are doing right now for 2021? So please, we need an update for fares. So thank you so much. Happy New Year and Merry Christmas.
Our next speaker is Brian Fritsch.
Hello, and thank you for the opportunity to testify today.
My name is Brian Fritsch, and I'm the Manager of Advocacy Campaigns for Regional Plan Association. COVID has accelerated so much change for us all in 2020, and we believe the MTA must prepare to change as well. Even with a vaccine now forthcoming, projections indicate that transit ridership may only be 80% of pre-pandemic levels for an extended period as hybrid models of work persist. Since fares contribute 38% of the MTA's revenue, the agency must adjust course. The time to think big and bold is now. Because of the enormous budget deficits at the agency, we need to face our future. Ideas for change, like variable tolling on MTA crossings and one-person train operation, already exist. RPA has advocated for many of them for years. We just need the will to get it done. Deep and detrimental service cuts and a reduced capital program could cripple the region's economic recovery, which has already been highly inequitable and damaging to our most vulnerable residents. It could also leave the system unrecognizable, initiating a death spiral that could take decades to overcome. We desperately need help from the federal government now, but we also recognize Governor Cuomo's role in protecting essential workers and other transit-dependent New Yorkers. That includes protecting the MTA's dedicated funding from the state, continuing the work to implement congestion pricing, and advocating for and advancing additional. We desperately hope that cuts do not take place. If our federal and state governments leave us no choice, we must protect what's vital, including bus service in the outer boroughs, core subway capacity, and the maintenance of our current system. A strong, viable public transportation system that efficiently keeps our region moving is absolutely essential to an equitable recovery. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Rachel Foss.
Good morning. My name is Rachel Foss, and I'm the Senior Research Analyst for reInvent Albany. We advocate for more transparent and accountable New York government, including for authorities like the MTA. I'm here to sum up our message today as follows. The MTA board must not approve $148 million in fare hikes for 2021, while Governor Cuomo is planning to raise at least $600 million in MTA dedicated funds. As the MTA said in July, it is asking for $12 billion in federal emergency funds, which includes $600 million to compensate for the loss of state subsidies. Subsidies are a euphemism for dedicated taxes, in this case, primarily Metro Mass Transportation Operating Assistance, or MMTOA funds. This $600 million was added on top of its spring deficit of $10.3 billion, which already accounted for COVID-19 revenue losses from ridership and the economic impact on dedicated taxes. To be clear, we fully support the MTA getting billions in much-needed federal COVID emergency aid, but at the same time, more federal aid is not a license for the governor to raid at least $600 million in MTA funds. Members of the MTA board are legally fiduciaries of the authority. Essentially, in law, the board owns the MTA. It would make sense that the MTA board understands decisions made by staff in its budget proposal. Unfortunately, it is not clear in budget documents that staff are assuming that the state of New York will be raiding at least $600 million in dedicated funds to prop up its own budget shortfalls. This is before the state legislature, which by law passes the state budget, has been able to weigh in on formal cuts to this year's budget or pass next year's budget. Budget documents don't show how much has been lost in tax receipts for dedicated funds and how much additional the state is skimming off the top to balance its own budget. The MTA is budgeting for MMTOA to drop by $700 to $800 million for this year and next. Across the board cuts are being applied at a 20% level. So why is MMTOA, the largest source of dedicated revenue, being cut by much more than this at 33% or 37% for next year? And where's the
Please
data
conclude your remarks.
Where's the data to show how much of this loss is due to tax receipt shortfalls? Again, it is unacceptable that the MTA is considering fare increases on riders.
Please conclude your remarks.
When the state is planning to raid its own dedicated funds. Thank you for your consideration.
Our next speaker is Eric Cohen.
Good morning. My name is Eric Cohen, and I come here today as a regular rider of the R train and until recently, several Brooklyn bus lines. I'd like to speak today about the MTA's pandemic response. Studies have shown that riding public transit is generally safe if everyone properly wears a mask. Yet, since I resumed commuting part-time in October, I have filed 16 complaints regarding MTA employees not wearing masks properly or at all. These have included bus operators, train crew, station agents, and car cleaners. In some cases, I've repeatedly reported the same employees along the R line and B41 bus route. The MTA's Twitter accounts are strewn with customer complaints about lack of mask compliance on subways and buses. MTA employees should be setting an example for all customers to follow, but for whatever reason, this is not happening. By this point in the pandemic, properly wearing a mask should be considered as essential as wearing a shirt or pants. Yet, even when your excellent customer service staff pledge to escalate mask issues to supervision, there are few visible results. Why is the MTA's response to a public health emergency so indifferent? The MTA has spoken about fare hikes and the need to close a budget gap brought on by a loss of revenues. Quite honestly, it will not matter what the MTA sets the fare to if it does not quickly restore the public's faith in the safety of the transit system. If you're wondering why ridership has plummeted, look no further than me. My response to seeing unmasked bus operators has been to completely stop riding buses. And if I could, I would stop riding the subway as well. If the MTA loses customers like me, who have been lifelong advocates for public transit, it is going to be in enormous trouble.
Our next speaker is Christopher Greif.
Good afternoon. I'm Christopher D. Greif. As a member of transit, as well as an advocate for people with disability, I'd like to remind MTA, but also remind our federal officials, we definitely need the money for our capital. That is not just the elevators, the ramps, but we need it on this update our trains of buses, including our accessory vehicles. We also need to do a lot more advocating because our MTA has been advocating when they do their press conference. But we need to remind that our board, we do not want to see these cuts. We do not want to see anything being discontinued. This happened 10 years ago. 10 years ago, we had buses being cut, but not accessibility can travel. They have to travel almost to 4 buses to their destination subway. We cannot have that again 10 years ago. We now need to move on to the future. So if our elected officials are listening, I swear to you right now, please do not cut or please put the funding into the MTA so we can get our capital elevators in, our stations up to date, buses and trains all up to date. Especially, I do not want to see our MTA employees getting cut or discontinued or laid off at all. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Felicia Park Rogers.
Good afternoon. My name is Felicia Park Rogers, and I am the Director of Regional Infrastructure Projects for Tri-State Transportation Campaign, a regional advocacy and policy organization working to reduce congestion, pollution, and to improve commutes. As we are in the midst of the holiday season, first of all, I would like to express my deep condolences once again to all of the families and friends of MTA workers who died this year due to COVID-19. I urge the MTA board to please push hard for transit workers to receive priority access to the coronavirus vaccine in order to protect these essential workers, as well as to keep transit, our region's lifeblood, running smoothly. As we all know, these are unprecedented times. The board is facing an impossible set of choices between worse and even more worse, as you confront the incomprehensible budget gap left in the wake of significantly reduced revenue from fare box taxes and tolls. It is long past time for the federal government to pass federal emergency relief, including $32 billion in funds for transit. The current so-called 908 proposal, which includes $15 billion for transit, is a good start, but it is not enough. We call on the federal Congress and particularly the Senate to stop its politicization of emergency relief funds for our nation and to immediately pass a proposal that includes meaningful aid for transit. Meanwhile, in the absence of federal aid, the state of New York must step up to support the MTA, even during this extremely painful time when all areas of the government are facing a dire budget crisis. We call on the state of New York to prioritize funding for the MTA, to implement new revenue streams for the MTA, and that the MTA should not be subjected to the same across-the-board cuts as other parts of the budget. Lastly, I turn to the subject of the proposed fare hikes. Even as the system is facing this tremendous crisis, we ask the board to please delay the implementation of fare hikes. As currently proposed, they would raise approximately $148 million. Given the estimated budget gap of $6 billion, this hike at the tremendous cost it would take on the.
Please conclude your remarks.
It's not worth it. We do encourage you to keep 7-day and 30-day passes as they are essential, and please raise the tolls and implement variable price tolling, as these are a means of raising.
Please conclude your remarks.
As well as a means of discouraging car congestion and greenhouse gas emissions. Thank you for your leadership during these difficult times.
Our next speaker is Deborah Greif.
Good afternoon. My name is Deborah Greif. I'm here speaking today as a person with disabilities. I want to thank you for building more elevators that are working, because now it's much easier for me to get home or get around to other parts of New York City when I am traveling. I would love to see, and I am going to still advocate, I would like to see more of the Brightman line, which happens to be the QMB, to be more elevators. I'd like Sheepshead Bay to have an elevator. At Grays and Neck Road, you have the ability, especially on the northbound side, to build a ramp so we can get up on the local, as well as to try it on the other side. We need to also build a ramp for the northbound at Avenue H. The reason I also suggest ramps is because ramps do not cost as much in the long run as elevators. They don't break down as much. And it's very easy for persons with using walkers, canes, or someone being pushed in a wheelchair to go up and down. It makes life a lot easier. In reference to the cuts proposed for the monthly pass and the weekly, please don't. And the reason is this: most people on disabilities barely have enough money to make it through the month. And that also can include, if we have to use Accessoride, who qualify, Accessoride is at full fare, at the moment $275. It's free at the moment because of the pandemic, but when fares are recollected there, it will be very expensive. Also, by having the monthly pass, it is easier to budget, and I can use the actual buses and trains. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is John Padula.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is John Padula. I'm a supervisor with Educational Vision Services, as well as a member of the Advisory Committee for Transit Accessibility. I'm glad to be here this morning. I hope everyone is safe and well. Folks, we need to move forward. Last month, I spoke about moving from rhetoric to reality. Yes, we need federal funding, but we need to be a unified front as what to do with that funding. We have to work together. It has to be a team effort. Even us advocates need to be on the same page. Money is tight. We have to be creative about our solutions, making sure that they are actually sustainable. We have to think outside of the box, maximizing whatever resources we do have. Yes, the capital plan must move forward. Accessoride has to evolve, affording disabled citizens the same rights, autonomy, and access to opportunity as every other citizen in our great city. I'm looking forward to both the Chief Accessibility Officer and VP of Accessoride positions being filled. I hope you guys get some innovative thinkers there in those positions. I would like to thank System-Wide Accessibility for all of their hard work, advocacy, and efforts. I want to thank Mr. Khaleesi for his great work on the board. I would also like to thank President Feinberg, Craig Cipriano, Monica Murray, Don Ramondi, and the rest of the Accessoride team for their support and listening to our concerns last week. In closing, I know that the MTA is striving for equity and excellence. Let's make that a reality for our great city. I'm optimistic that there are better days to come, so let's all keep fighting the good fight. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy New Year to everybody. And as I always like to say, never mistake disability for inability. And remember, low expectations do lead to low outcomes. My name is John Padula. God bless and be well.
Mr. Chairman, that concludes public comment.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to begin by noting that the entire 30 minutes of public comment, as well as the full public comment video, is available online to board members, members of the public, etc. Thank you for joining this month's virtual meeting of the MTA Board. I'll start with a short update on our preparations in advance of the winter storm expected this afternoon. We are fully prepared for whatever comes our way. The MTA has well-established plans in place for weather events like this storm, with personnel and equipment ready to go and our 24/7 command centers activated. Under the leadership of our agency presidents, our crews have already been hard at work winterizing the system, putting tire chains on buses and antifreeze on track switches, and lots more. And when the snow starts this afternoon, staff will be on standby to spread salt and clear snow and ice from our platforms, stairs, signals, and switches. We've also mobilized teams to remove downed trees that fall across tracks. I want to thank all of our hardworking employees who do this work every year, every storm. As always, our highest priority is the safety of our customers and employees, making sure we provide safe and reliable service during the storm and after. Due to the severity of today's anticipated storm, we strongly urge all customers to avoid unnecessary travel today, if that's possible. But if you must travel, please use extreme caution and stay updated on the latest service changes via our website and apps. Now on to today's board meeting. As we have done at several board meetings this year, we will begin by observing a moment of silence to acknowledge and remember members of the MTA family who have passed away from coronavirus since we last met. Today, we honor members of the New York City Transit family who we've lost. Sarah?
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, sadly, we have two names to discuss today. We mourn these colleagues and our thoughts and prayers are with their families. John Fernandez and James Arjun.
I now ask you join us all in a moment of silence for our fallen colleagues. Thank you. The COVID-19 pandemic has made 2020 a uniquely difficult and challenging year. We've lost 130 of our heroic colleagues as a result of COVID-19. Another who was murdered in a deliberately set act of arson on a train, and still others in the MTA family. And we continue to remember and mourn each of them and to honor their dedication and service to the system and to the region during this unprecedented health crisis. Our ridership and finances plummeted because of the pandemic to never before seen lows, worse even than the Great Depression. But as we've seen time and time again, just how resilient and heroic our employees truly are. And this year is no different. I'm proud of our colleagues, each of whom have shown tremendous courage and commitment and heroism. And with the lessons learned last year, we will emerge a stronger and more flexible organization. If there was a silver lining to 2020, it is that not only we succeeded in our core mission of keeping New York moving through the worst of the pandemic, but we did it with heroism on the part of our workforce, creativity, and innovation. Our subway cars, trains, buses, and stations and paratransit vehicles have never been cleaner. Mark Dowd, working with partners across the agencies, led the effort to test new innovative technologies to combat COVID-19 that we can leverage for years to come. This includes new air filtration pilots on the railroads, upgrades to our bus and railroad apps to show crowding on our vehicles and rolling stock, and launching a live subway map. And we are starting a first-of-its-kind study in the United States, partnering with the Federal Department of Homeland Security and MIT to test the best measures to protect customers and employees from the spread of infectious diseases. Sarah Meyer has harnessed the good in all New Yorkers with staff and citizen volunteers in our now famous mask force to help remind all our customers of the single most important thing we can all do during this crisis: wearing a mask and wearing it correctly. Since its inception, the mask force has distributed more than 6 million masks to customers. And I'm happy to share that our latest mask survey shows a 99% usage on our buses and 97% on subways. These are impressive and important numbers, and I thank our customers and employees for doing their part. Let's now talk about the 2021 budget and federal funding. Even with these bright spots that I just mentioned, there is no denying the unimaginable difficulty of this year. In addition to the devastating human toll it has taken on our agency and nation, it has devastated MTA finances, leaving us with hard options that could have lasting consequences on this region for years to come. As CFO Bob Freund and I both said last month, our November financial plan was one of the most challenging the MTA has ever had to develop. We are hopeful for a better 2021 with COVID vaccines being administered and more COVID vaccines on the way, a new administration in the White House, a transit-friendly administration, and potentially a change in leadership of the United States Senate. But there are no guarantees. I do want to thank a moment and congratulate Mayor Pete Buttigieg on his nomination for Secretary of Transportation, and we look forward to working with him in the months ahead. Federal funding remains our best shot at survival, and I use that word advisedly, survival, so that we can avoid horrific measures like massive service cuts of up to 50% on the railroads and up to 40% on subways and buses, the gutting of our historic capital plan, fare and toll hikes above what we had planned, which are currently being discussed in public hearings, and laying off more than 9,000 of our hardworking colleagues. Make no mistake, these actions, if we have to take them, if our hand is forced, will impair any shot at recovery for the state and national economies. We're closely monitoring the bipartisan negotiations in Washington, and we're encouraged by media reports and updates from Washington for the potential of near-term federal aid for the MTA. But we must remain vigilant until legislation is passed and signed into law. We urge Congress to do the right thing and not go home without delivering this funding for mass transit and the MTA. This issue should be above partisan politics. This is in the best interest of the economy of both the state, the city, and our nation. I want to acknowledge the support of Senator Schumer, Speaker Pelosi, and the New York congressional delegation led by Chair Nita Lowey. Mrs. Lowey is retiring after a career of honorable and effective public service, and we extend our congratulations and our sincere thanks. Bob will present our 2020 budget and four-year financial plan shortly. This budget will assume the assumption of $4.5 billion in federal funding for 2021. That's an assumption. But I want to be clear about what the board is being asked to vote on today and what it's not being asked to vote on today, and what the reality of our situation is. The board will be asked today to consider and vote on adopting the 2021 budget and the 2021 to 24 financial plan. Today's vote, however, is not a vote on any fare and toll policy change proposals. The public hearing process to gather input on this round of proposals began in December, and we have heard from nearly 200 speakers and have received nearly 1,700 comments to date. Our final hearing, virtual hearing, takes place next Monday, after which we and the board will review the comments and develop final proposals for the board to consider next year. Today's vote is also not a vote on potential drastic service cuts of up to 40% on subways and buses and 50% on commuter rail. If we do not receive $4.5 billion in federal aid to address our 2021 deficit, we will need to revise our budget and take action early next year on severe actions to balance the budget. Again, without $4.5 billion in federal funding, the board may be asked to authorize public hearings on service cuts as early as January, for implementation as early as May. Were we to receive $4.5 billion in federal aid, our 2021 budget will be in balance, postponing and avoiding for 2021 the severe service cuts and layoffs. But to be clear, $4.5 billion will not solve our total deficit. We still project nearly $8 billion in deficits in 2022, 2023, and 2024 that we will need to take action to address. Our total request to the federal government remains a total of $12 billion for 21, 22, 23, and 24. Again, these are choices none of us here at the MTA want to have to make, but they are choices we may be forced to make if Washington doesn't deliver. This isn't a bluff, this is real. And the MTA is not alone. Systems across the country are facing the same hard choices and evaluating similar options. Washington, D.C.'s Metro, for instance, recently proposed new bus and train service reductions, while MBTA in Boston has approved and accelerated the implementation of a reduced base service proposal across all their modes of transit, again, as a result of significant ridership loss in both cases. LA Metro and BART are maintaining service reductions for 2021. SEPTA and San Francisco Muni are currently proposing significant planning reduction scenarios given the ongoing uncertainty of additional federal aid for public transportation systems. Our agencies have also been fine-tuning service levels as well over the last several months based on new travel patterns, crew availability, and continued depressed ridership. Long Island Railroad, which has been operating at approximately 90% of normal weekday service since New York's Phase 1 reopening in June, plans to further adjust its service in January to approximately 75 to 80% of regular service in order to better match current and forecasted near-term ridership. These are temporary adjustments. Right now, Long Island Railroads is serving just a quarter of its average pre-pandemic weekly ridership, with a 90% service schedule. These proposed service adjustments are not budget related, will not result in any headcount reductions, and require no board action. Phil Eng will provide more details later in the meeting, but I want to be clear that these changes are not a substitute for the worst case scenario service reductions of up to 50% on the railroads and 40% on subways and buses that may be necessary absent additional federal aid. I want to end my remarks with another moment of recognition to our incredible workforce and talented team. In the face of a horrific pandemic, they have still managed to deliver service and to advance major projects this year that will fortify our system for decades to come, like the rollout of the Omni contactless fare payment system to all subway stations and buses by the end of this month, installation of new elevators to improve subway accessibility, completion of the L train tunnel project, and delivering PTC on both railroads by the federal deadline. So while we reflect on this difficult and unusual year, we remember that there's still much to be thankful for, like the incredible essential workers, including the brave women and men of the MTA who have kept our city functioning. We can all take pride in being New York tough. Now I'll turn it over to Carl Hammond, Deputy Chief Safety Officer, for a COVID update. Carl.
Thank you, Chairman. As is always the case, the safety of our employees and customers remain paramount. The increase in the number of COVID cases in the New York City area is growing and of great concern to us. Currently, the city is at 4.04% rate of infection for the last 7 days, with rates of at least 2 points higher in outlying counties. Predictably, the number of MTA employees contracting the virus has also increased. While MTA's rate is half of the city's at 2.1%, our 7-day average for new cases continued to grow. Of importance is that through the availability of volunteer diagnostic testing and aggressive efforts to identify close contacts, we were able to sustain the availability of our workforce such that operations have been minimally affected. Our other efforts to protect our workforce and customers remain robust. We continue the many protocols previously established to protect our employees and customers, some of which include providing over 19 million masks to employees and customers, 15 million pairs of gloves, 96,000 gallons of hand sanitizer, 10.3 million sanitizing wipes, and 219,000 gallons of cleaning solution. Further, we continue our daily cleaning and disinfecting of stations, trains, buses, paratransit vehicles, and employee workspaces. Likewise, our air filtration enhancements we have implemented in facilities, trains, and buses, together with the pilot projects we're undertaking using cutting-edge air filtration products, remain a centerpiece of our efforts to protect our employees and customers. We continue to lead the surface transportation industry through our voluntary COVID-19 diagnostic testing in our medical assessment centers, field sites, and at Northwell clinics. Since the last board meeting, the number of our employees choosing to take the diagnostic test has swelled to nearly 11,000 and identified over 170 employees who were not exhibiting symptoms yet were positive. There is little doubt that the availability of diagnostic testing has significantly contributed to protecting our workforce and providing for their more expeditious return to duty, and consequently has enabled sustained operations of our transportation systems. Together with New York State and New York City health officials, we cannot overstate the importance of everyone practicing safe deterrence activities at home and in your neighborhoods. The introduction of individuals who have been in other locations such as schools, stores, restaurants, and other homes into your family's presence, especially during the holidays, presents significant risk to you and your loved ones. Family members returning from school and other environments should be encouraged to get COVID-19 diagnostic testing, and as wearing of face coverings is recognized by healthcare community as the single most important deterrent to contracting and spreading the virus, you and those friends and family that come in contact should wear a facial covering when together until sufficient isolation have passed or they have tested out of quarantine through diagnostic testing. Being with family and friends is no time to let your guard down. Again, we are all at a critical moment in time where colder weather and holiday interactions present greater risk to New York, our workforce, and their families. We highly encourage our employees to take a diagnostic testing program as they return to work following interactions with family they have not routinely been with. Their testing will help protect their colleagues, family, and friends. It is a genuine sign of respect. As noted earlier, together with social distancing, mask usage remains the single most effective defense against contracting and spreading the virus, according to the CDC. Mask usage by our riders remains high. As mentioned by the chairman, our most recent surveys have found a 99% usage rate on buses and 97% usage in the subway. And we thank our ridership for their support and respect shown to one another. Also of importance, with the recent approvals and initial distribution of a COVID-19 vaccine, our staffs are in contact with state and other officials as we plan to ensure that we have the training, resources, policies, and procedures in place for vaccination of our workforce and potential support to local vaccination efforts. We have also requested priority order for transit workers. In closing, we are grateful for the patronage of our customers and are committed to continuing to bring the safest ground transportation to New York. Chairman, this concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. Any questions from Carl, for Carl? Okay, good. Thank you. With that, I'm going to ask Bob Foran, the CFO. It's time to discuss and consider adoption of the MTA's 2021 budget and the 2021 to 24 financial plan. At our November meeting, Bob briefed the board and the public on the budget and financial plan and materials that were provided then. I'm now going to turn the floor over to Bob to introduce the action items we will be addressing today for the 21 budget and 2021 to 24 financial plan. Bob.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let's turn to the first slide. I'm going to review quickly what we discussed in November and then how it leads into the budget proposal for 2021. The preliminary November plan showed a dire financial situation ahead of us, $16 billion of deficits through 2024, as you can see at the top of the page. However, we had identified a number of actions to take to reduce that deficit. We had additional savings initiatives, 259 in 2020 and 601, almost 500 million going forward a year. Direct capital lockbox to operating. We had the ability by legislation to use the lockbox money, which were dedicated for capital for operating purposes. And so we're doing that for the next 2 years as authorized by law. We're committed to capital funds, that's pay-as-you-go capital, and taking from the capital program and putting them to the operating budget. We're using the OPEB trust to pay current OPEB costs, that's other post-employment benefit expenses. We're expecting FEMA reimbursement in 2021, and we're using the general reserve in 2020. In total, that's a benefit of this year of about $1.4 billion. In total, through 2024, about $4.5 billion. As you know, we're borrowing monies through the Federal Reserve's MLF program, 2.9. That should close tomorrow. So that money will be a deficit financing. It will be applied to this year's deficit, and then the balance, which would be about $1.8 billion, will be applied to the deficit in 2021. So with all of those actions, we still have a budget deficit projected before we made certain adjustments of almost $8.8 billion. Now, we asked McKinsey to update the May 1st analysis, which they did, for the November plan. But the preliminary results were much more pessimistic than what we saw in May. Here on this chart, you see 3 lines. The green line at the top is what the midpoint was between the best case and the worst case in July. And then you see the kind of pink line and then the more red line. Those are the best and worst cases that McKinsey presented preliminarily for our November financial plan. You can see a significant reduction in ridership between that on the best case and the worst case. We decided to use the worst case of the November preliminary numbers just because we have very little room to maneuver if things get worse than the worst case. We'd hopefully be surprised if things are better than the worst case because that's a positive for us, but we're building into our budget the worst case analysis. And basically, if you look down toward the bottom of the page, that results in a reduction, further reduction in revenues of $1.6 billion in 2021, almost $1.9 billion in 2022, $2 billion in 2023, and $1.5 billion in 2024, which now increases our deficits to 4.47 in 2021, 4.9 in 2022, 3.3 in 2023, and 3.1 in 2024. So that brings us to what we need to solve for the budget deficit of 2021. And as the Chairman said, we are assuming for this budget the receipt of $4.5 billion in federal aid. That will offset the total deficit that we were facing, give us a slight surplus of $29 million, and allow us not to have to take the drastic actions that we had included in the November plan of significant service reductions, the 50% and 40%, and the wage freeze. But as you can see, and as the Chairman stated in his comments, the deficits continue, and we are going to have to take actions to offset those deficits in the future, absent continuing federal support. And those include service reductions, permanent wage freeze for reps and non-reps through 2022, additional fare and toll increases above the 4% that we've already projected within the financial plan, possible deficit financing. So you can see that we may have a solution, hopefully with the federal receipt of $4.5 billion, but we do have going forward significant deficits to be addressed. Now let's turn to the actions that we're going to ask you to vote on today. You have a staff summary and you have adoption materials on director's desk. Let me just go through the highlights of the staff summary. The purpose of the summary is to secure MTA Board adoption of the accompanying 2021 revised proposed budget and the 4-year financial plan 2021 through 2024, which includes approving the 2020 December forecast and plan adjustments, and 2, authorization of budget and plan adjustments, including MTA policy actions as set forth below in the staff summary. This document summarizes the December plan, which projects ending cash balances of $1,786,000,000 in 2020 and $29 million in 2021, with projected cash deficits of $3.28 million in 22, $2.3 billion in 2023, and $2.2 million in 2024. Although the MTA has requested $12 billion in new federal aid prior to the McKinsey's updated analysis, the December plan assumes the receipt of just 4.5 of such aid to address the 2021 shortfall. 2020 is balanced from the receipt of $2.9 million borrowed from the Federal Reserve's Municipal Liquidity Facility, and the assumption is that 2021 will be balanced with new federal aid. The 2021 budget and 2021-24 financial plan projected cash deficits will be revised as conditions dictate, as information regarding federal funding is forthcoming, but will be balanced on a cash basis by the end of 2021. The MTA will utilize all available resources and tools to ensure that MTA ends 2021 on a self-sustaining basis as required by statute, including service reductions, wage freezes, fare toll increases above the planned 4%, and/or deficit financing, all painful and all unwanted. Let me go over the recommendation for the staff. This is on page 7 of the staff summary. It's recommended that the board adopt the 2021 revised proposed budget and four-year financial plan, 21 to 24, which includes approving the 2020 December forecast and plan adjustments. Their approval of this plan will supersede prior board plan approvals for this period. Notice that the projected 21 and 23 fare toll increase proposals will require separate board actions in advance of those dates. Authorize staff under the guidance and direction of the Chairman, CEO, the Chief Financial Officer, or their designees to take actions to implement the policy actions set forth in the plan. Authorize staff to draw down the unexpended 2020 general reserve of $170 million, which will be used to help balance the 2020 budget. Authorize staff to redirect funds deposited in the capital lockbox during 2020 and 2021 from the real property transfer surcharge, the mansion tax, and the internet marketplace tax to the operating budget as permitted under the Public Authorities Law. Authorize staff to suspend contributions to committed to capital. This action would reduce operating funded contributions to the capital program by $602 million over the planned period. Authorize staff to draw down the $337 million in the OPEB trust fund to provide funding to offset the 2020 current OPEB expenses. Authorize staff to draw down the $2.9 billion in proceeds from the Federal Reserve's Municipal Liquidity Facility to help balance the 2020 and 2021 budgets. Authorize technical adjustments to MTA budgets and forecasts on a non-material nature in the 2021 February plan. Authorize adjustments of MTA budgets and forecasts to reflect labor settlements approved from time to time by the board. Authorize staff under the guidance and direction of the Chairman, CEO, the Chief Financial Officer, or their designees, including the MTA Treasurer, to take additional budget and cash management actions as has been done in past budgets to draw on the general reserve and/or make budget adjustments to respond to unexpected expenses or revenue subsidy shortfalls, and other actions including advance of the bridge and tunnel operating surplus, uses of MTA MRT2 corporate account monies, uses of the payroll mobility tax and replacement funds and MTA aid. Authorize staff acting under Section 1266 of the Public Authorities Law to enter into interagency loan agreements among the MTA and its affiliates and subsidiaries, and use of the stabilization reserve and the provision for prompt payment of contractual obligations. Mr. Chairman, those are the recommendations of the staff to the board for the adoption of the 2021 budget and 2021-2024 financial plan.
Thank you, Bob. Before I open the floor up to discussion, I'm going to move the adoption of the MTA 2021 final proposed budget and the four-year financial plan for 2021 to 24, and all the other actions presented in the board materials. I move. Do I have a second?
The Chairman, I second it. And this is Larry Schwartz. Can Tom just make sure I'm recorded in the present?
Duly noted.
Commissioner Dunn. I'm going to open it up for Discussion. Commissioner
I do.
Commissioner Borelli.
Thank you, Chairman.
as the MTA meets today to meet and review and consider its 2021 budget, I'm compelled to make a comment based on events that have happened. The residents and commuters of Rockland County are being shortchanged. While the budget we're being asked to vote for today does not, at this time, include the horrific cuts to service and unfair impact on our loyal and hardworking employees, it does leave open the very real possibility for the elimination of services to the west of Hudson if the federal funding does not materialize, as outlined in the July plan. And I just heard it referenced as the November plan, which I'm assuming is the same thing. This July plan is a continuation and evidence of the inequitable treatment of the residents and commuters of Rockland County. 8 years ago, before my time, Rockland County conducted a value gap analysis, basically the difference between the value of the MTA service Rockland received and the estimate of the dollars paid to the MTA by Rockland commuters and residents. The gap was about $40 million at that time. Since then, the service to our area has only been reduced. The July plan showed a savings of approximately $25 million if you were to eliminate the service to the west of Hudson. While there are many moving parts contained in this budget, it is still very clear that the $40 million gap has been underestimated and is significantly stronger. What is really insulting to Rockland County is that while other MTA service within the July plan were being reduced, only reduced, and yes, in some areas very significantly, to balance our budget and deal with the COVID-19 reductions in ridership, the July plan proposed
money for concession.
Rockland County service simply eliminated. I suspect the reason west of Hudson is eliminated in the July plan, rather than seeing similar reduction to service like other parts of the service area, is that the service to Rockland is so thin and is currently reduced to its limits, and that the only reduction remaining is to simply cut it. I've mentioned before, why would Rockland County continue to be part of the MTA and pay into the system if our service to this area is eliminated? I'm asking today that the board, while we navigate this important issue of COVID-19, its impact on our transit system and our employees, that we do not forget our neighbors to the north and west who work hard to earn their salaries and need reliable transportation, that they please be treated equitably. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Law?
Hey, Pat, can you hear me better now?
Perfect.
Hey, thank you. Thank you, Pat. Thank you, Bob. I want to put on the record that I'm relying on the representations that Pat made and the representations on page 7 of the budget material sent out last night that Bob just highlighted, that fare increases will require separate board actions. And thus a vote for this budget and financial plan is not a vote for any fare increase at this time, because I maintain that there should be no fare increase for 21 because of the COVID pandemic, for all the reasons I've mentioned in the last few meetings, and that we'll have an opportunity to discuss any and all fare increases in January after the public hearings. Thank you very much.
Kevin, I confirm that I confirm those understandings and the representations that were made earlier. Commissioner Mack, Commissioner Lynn.
Yeah, I echo Kevin Law's feeling as well. And I look forward to the hearings and a brisk discussion.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Lynn.
I'd like to make offer two thoughts. I support the current FY21 assumption of $4.5 billion of federal relief. Hopefully that work is being done right now in Washington, and certainly it's dollars that we deserve given the incredible crisis that we're living through with the COVID pandemic. But we're going to know a lot more about finances probably by the end of this week, hopefully positively, and certainly we'll know a lot more in early January with the Georgia elections. I think we need to be prepared to move with a full and robust discussion in December. And I want to again suggest, as I did last month, but now moving forward a month, that we have a robust set of discussions in January, understanding what exactly has happened and what we think we should be doing going forward. And I think it's unreasonable to expect a vote on any significant change of board before there is a substantial set of discussions prior to the board meeting. Second, I have several times requested the MTA engage a transportation economist so that we can intelligently consider the fare and toll options that the MTA is considering. I think we need much more than just personal hunches of what will be the impact of what's done. And I asked what major corporation would consider radical changes in their price structure, especially in the middle of a pandemic, without careful economic analysis. And the MTA should be no different. Thank you.
Commissioner Samuelson.
Yeah, Pat, I just want to point out there's almost near certainty, I believe right now, that the federal money is coming, and I think the announcement's going to be sooner rather than later. And I think it's also very likely that state and local money are going to be excluded from the federal bailout when it gets here. And the exclusion of state and local money is problematic on so many levels, but I think the greatest impact of that is the strong potential that New York State will try to transfer dedicated MTA money into the overall state operating budget, or put it elsewhere, or rate it, or swipe it, however you want to characterize it. And I think this board needs to be mindful of that and be prepared to collectively oppose any kind of raid on MTA dedicated funding. Because potentially we could be right back where we were if state and local money is not in that federal bailout. And I want everybody to be mindful. And then the second piece of that is it's just becoming more and more in everybody's face here that new sources of revenue are necessary. The federal bailout will get you through 2021, hopefully. But after that, you're projecting all of these deficits. And I think the MTA needs to pivot, perhaps in ways that they've not done in the past, toward having a really in-depth conversation with the unions and the state legislature regarding what those potential sources of new revenue could be. Otherwise, this meeting is going to repeat itself. It'll be like the movie that plays itself over and over again in about a year, even with the federal money coming. All right, thanks.
John, thank you. I hope your expression of confidence is well-founded and occurs in the next day or so. The other thing I do want to say is I want to thank each of the union leaders at the regional and national level, especially you, John, and your leadership and members for advocacy, effective and smart advocacy in Washington. And that's true with respect to each of the union leaders on our board and each of the unions, and that was much appreciated. Anybody else? Commissioner Zuckerman, Commissioner Kulisi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. John, that is welcome news, because I think having the same conversation like Groundhog Day is exhausting. You know, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome. So my hope is you're absolutely right. But I do wonder about the question you've raised, which is what are we going to do in the out years? Because it is very clear that whether we're talking about service reductions or fare increases, there is just no way to close those out years that Bob just showed us of $3+ billion every year. We heard recently from Sarah, I forget what month it was, when they were discussing maybe a 40% reduction in New York City transit service would yield only an $800 million savings. So that's a 40% reduction yields a 10% cost savings roughly. That is a high fixed cost business. And that tells you that we don't have a lot of room on service reductions to close the budget gap. Yes, we have to find new revenue sources, although I do admire, Bob, your efforts, and Pat, yours as well, on cost management. I would say, though, the second point I wanted to make is I want to associate myself with what Kevin said related to fare increases. On a global level, this is not the time to raise fares because our riders can't afford it, and there's no way we're going to close the gap on ridership, whether with a 4% increase or a 40% increase. It is not going to close that gap. And on a provincial level, as those in this board who've been some time know, I represent riders, and so does Kevin, so does Michael, that are paying upwards of $7,000 a year, $7,000 a year already. It is already an egregious amount of money to be paying. The best customers of the MTA can pay $1 more and actually should be paying significantly less. And so when we have that discussion in January that David and Kevin identified, we're going to have a very robust conversation about what other revenue sources are available, because there's no way, and I do not support a budget that increases fares. We'll come to that again, Kevin, as you said in January, but we cannot close this gap on the backs of riders. They're the ones who can least afford it. There are many other stakeholders that can afford to contribute, as John alluded to. So thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Neil. Three last comments. Commissioner Kulisi, Commissioner Schwartz, Commissioner Albert.
So thank you. This is really tough. The MTA made a huge commitment to people with disabilities prior to COVID with 70 new stations in 5 years, really unprecedented. And I appreciate that commitment to increasing accessibility, but it's all going to fall behind because, we need support. And I very much hope to see that the federal funding comes through. I would implore the MTA to work closely with the board to ensure that service cuts and fare increases are an absolute last resort. I appreciate the proposed budget assumes that we will be getting the 4.5 of federal aid, but we really need to think about creative solutions in the event that this aid does not come through. Potential service cuts and fare increases will make it worse for everyone, but this will certainly make it worse for people with disabilities because we don't have the access that everyone else does. So it just makes it that much worse. I want to really talk about what Bob Lynn and Kevin Law and Zuckerman were saying as well, that we need to be able to have a robust conversation in January about our next steps. And I really want to support Commissioner Lynn's request for an economist to look at everything. So thank you.
Commissioner Schwartz, Commissioner Albert for brief comments.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Listen, I'm going to vote in favor of passing this budget. This is a difficult budget. It's not a budget that all of us want to vote on today, but it's necessary that we do that. Obviously, we're hearing good news coming out of Washington today that there'll be at least a $4 billion assistance, so we can avoid, at least for now, making some very difficult and hard choices regarding service. Hopefully, choices we'll never have to make. But we're clearly not out of the woods by any stretch of the imagination, and it's going to take a lot of work and effort on the part of this board and part of the Finance Committee, starting in January, to roll up our sleeves and work with you, the finance team, and others on figuring out how we're going to continue to close deficits and find ways to continue to streamline operations, reduce costs, and make the agency as effective and efficient as possible. We will have plenty of time once the public hearing portion of the fare hike issue closes for the board to have a robust discussion regarding fare and toll hikes, whether there should be any at all, whether they should be less than what was proposed, whether they should be structured in a different format. We will have that opportunity, and whatever decision the board makes come 2021, we'll have to make, if we need to, any adjustments to the budget at that time. But I just think there's too much at stake here for the riders, our workers in our state and city, for us not to adopt the budget today. So therefore, I will be voting in the affirmative. Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner. Commissioner Albert.
Yes, I want to agree with many of my fellow commissioners on their statements about not raising fares at this time. And I think the approach that you and CFO Foran are taking is a reasonable approach. When you talk about discussions taking place in January about fare options and other changes, when in January are we aiming at? Obviously, the new president doesn't take office until the 20th. I don't know the date of the January meeting at this moment, but were you talking about weeks before that?
Andrew, I think at the board briefing, obviously there's the inauguration, there's the special elections in Georgia. I don't have that date at my fingertips, but we'll come back to you. Commissioner Jones, briefly.
All right. Yeah, I just want to follow up on Larry Schwartz's comment.
I too will be supporting this, but I'm concerned, I think I raised this at the last meeting, that to combine committee meetings with the full board meeting, particularly as it relates to finances and the in-depth discussion we have to do, is not appropriate. I think we have to go back, certainly for finance, not to have a joint meeting of this sort, but to have a two-step, to have a serious in-depth discussion, hopefully, as Bob Lynn suggested, with an economist to help us before we make critical decisions, rather than lumping this together in one meeting. So I ask that this be at least considered as we go forward.
Thank you, Commissioner. Randy, briefly, please.
Yeah, I echo Commissioner Burley's comments. Yeah, we can't afford to lose any more service that we already lost on the porch in Pascack Valley. And I think it's a great idea to have an economist give us the information that we need. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. I'm going to take a vote. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed or abstentions? Thank you. The budget and financial plan carries. Obviously, more to come on the federal legislation. Just put me down as I'm from Missouri, the show me state, and hopefully the words of optimism will prove out. But until then, let's remain vigilant. I'm going to ask Jano Lieber to provide an update on C&D and Capital Program Oversight Committee. Jano.
Thank you, Pat. This month's CPOC materials include capital program status and updates and the third quarter core and safety and Sandy traffic light reports. The focus this month of the CPOC committee and materials is on the 5 integrated capital projects. Of those 5, 2, there really is no update. That's 2nd Avenue Subway Phase 2, which has been waiting for federal action for quite some time, and Penn Access, the 4 stations in the Bronx project, as it's sometimes called, which has been placed on hold in the middle of its procurement because of our funding issues, and it was dependent on non-federal monies that obviously became unavailable during the crisis. We do have reporting in the book on the 3 other integrated projects, Third Track, so-called Long Island Railroad Expansion Project, East Side Access, and the 42nd Street Connection project. The book also includes a joint railroad positive train control PTC update, which will be discussed during the joint railroad portion of this meeting. Later in the meeting, I'll update you on a very successful procurement for a package of 8 ADA stations, which are being funded through existing federal grant programs. It's money that we needed to get out the door this year, and we were able to put it to good use for ADA stations, and I will go through that. Obviously, the IEC and I are available to answer questions on the C&D aspects of any of these materials.
Any questions for Jano? All right, good. I'm now going to turn to Al Petray, who's going to provide an update on Omni. Al, over to you. Al, you're muted.
My apologies. I'll start over. Good morning. I'm pleased to report that we're on track for the completion of the rollout of contactless Omni readers at all 472 subway stations by the end of the year. And as previously reported, we have also completed the 2 Staten Island railway stations where fares are collected. Please let me take this moment to publicly thank and congratulate the Cubic and MTA teams for their hard work during this extremely challenging pandemic. In addition to the subways, we are on target to complete the rollout of readers on all buses by year's end as well. Queens buses are already complete, but have not been activated for revenue service just yet. And we are on schedule to complete all front doors and all SBS reader installations on Brooklyn buses by year end as well. I am also pleased to report with over 33 million Omni taps budget and on schedule to reach substantial completion in 2023. In fact, at the end of November, Omni surpassed the 10% milestone of ridership usage at Omni-enabled stations, more than doubling its share of pre-pandemic station entries. We have moved deep into the design of the remaining functions of the Omni system and look forward to introducing the Omni card and reduced fare features, along with supporting online and retail network card load and reload sales channels in 2021. Additionally, we will also introduce the Omni mobile app and relaunch the Omni website as online sales channels, increasing self-service options for our customers. In October, the MTA Long Island Railroad and Metro North Railroads obtained board approval to exercise the competitively pre-negotiated option in the Omni contract for Omni equipment spare parts. And if you have any questions, I will be pleased to answer them now.
Questions? First, Al, congratulations to you on the team. It's an incredible achievement, especially given the conditions of the last several months of the pandemic. Congratulations, a great thing for our customers. Questions?
Thank you very much.
Questions for Al?
Just one.
Andrew?
Yes, Al, are you still on target for approximately spring to introduce all fare types to Omni?
Based on what's going on with the fare changes and potential increases or decreases in what we do, we are on target, yes, and we will be prepared.
Terrific. Thank you. Congrats.
Thank you.
Commissioner Khaleesi.
Thank you. I do, as you know, I do have some concerns about the experiences differences related to people with disabilities. And people with disabilities and the RFM users should have the same open loop experience as non-RFM users.
We've looked into that, and although, as I know you know, that's never been done anywhere at any property in the world, we've looked into it. It is feasible, and depending upon our business rules and what timing we can achieve, we're looking to experiment with that on a pilot next year, probably fourth quarter.
Yeah, I thank you. I appreciate that, but I just encourage you to speed it up as much as you can because Omni is important for everyone. Thank you.
Understood.
Thank you.
All right, good. Al, thanks very much.
Thank you.
The minutes of the November joint meeting and minutes from each committee have been distributed to all members. They're also on the website. Are there any corrections or omissions?
Pat.
Andrew.
Yes. In your introduction of new Transit Bureau Chief O'Reilly,
yes.
The minutes refer to her as Catherine when it's Kathleen.
Andrew, you're absolutely right. Our apologies to the chief. I think I'm going to have the script changed going forward, and just put your comment in the script, and much more efficient. We'll make that change. Thanks. Anybody else with changes? All in favor? I move it. All in favor? Aye. Any noes or abstentions? Thank you. Phil, would you report on the railroad, please?
Thank you, Pat. Good morning, everyone. As 2020 comes to an end, and with the COVID-19 vaccine distribution underway, I know we're all hopeful for a fresh start in 2021. But first, I want to update on Long Island Railroad service for the new year. Service levels are always developed to meet ridership demands and support planned work, both maintenance and capital. At the beginning of this pandemic, we had to be flexible and agile when making decisions about our service in order to provide essential workers, including MTA's own, the service they needed while protecting our frontline staff. At the start of this crisis, we were running about 70% of our pre-pandemic service levels as ridership plummeted during the first shutdown. Since then, we've been constantly monitoring levels and adjusting service as necessary to 75% and then again to 90%. With the second wave upon us, we have seen ridership drop once again to about 24% of normal day weekday ridership. So starting January 25th, we will be adjusting our service levels to approximately 75 to 80% of our pre-pandemic levels to allow critical work to be performed and still support the essential workers who form our core ridership. To be clear, these are not budget-related changes, and all branches will continue to be served. These changes will provide adequate service to current levels of ridership, and as always, we will adjust accordingly if necessary. To be clear, this is an informational item for the board and will require no board action. And as we embark on a new set of infrastructure activity for 2021, flowing into the spring months, we are striving for another successful year of delivering critical projects while providing essential service. While this year's pandemic has created new and unimaginable challenges for us and all public transportation agencies across the globe, I want to assure the public and this board that I have not lost sight of any commitments I made when I first took the helm in April of 2018. I said from the very beginning how it's my responsibility to ensure managers and staff have clear direction and that they have adequate resources and tools in place to accomplish work in a more cost-effective, efficient, and safe way. That has not changed. On the Long Island Railroad Forward, we continue to instill a sense of urgency that is helping us deliver improved service, reliability, and safety, including management oversight in the planning, scheduling, and performance of work. And we didn't stop there, not only implementing best practices from others, but using new innovations to develop some of our own. I say this as I address the recently published reports regarding actions of a small number of Long Island Railroad employees from 2018. I want all to know that we have and continue to take proactive actions to make changes. Here are a few of them. In January 2019, the Long Island Railroad Overtime Task Force created a specialized group and began monthly reviews focused on the planning, improving, and scheduling of track maintenance projects. In the second quarter of 2019, the task force started reviewing high overtime earners for anomalies, including random audits. In July 2019, we implemented third-party worksite procedures to better track, approve, and pay out overtime in advance of Kronos clocks. And in August 2019, we began installing biometric clocks in our offices and field trailers. A total of 595 clocks have been installed across our territory, and by early March of 2020, all employees were enrolled with a 97% usage rate here. Due to the pandemic, advice of health experts led to the temporary halt of the bioscan feature to avoid touching a common surface. In response, Long Island Railroad has now tested and began issuing new identification cards to all employees earlier this month. These new cards allow staff to safely again resume full swiping to log time and attendance. And while we remain laser focused on this effort and recognize we have more work to do, this entire year and many accomplishments our workforce has achieved serve as examples of improved planning and management oversight as the workforce continues to deliver even in the midst of a pandemic. In 2020, we helped plan and support 15 weekends of full mainline shutdowns, each time completing the work on time and on budget, safely restoring service for Monday morning riders. In 2020, we successfully completed unprecedented but vital state of good repair work, often piggybacking on third track weekends for further cost savings. Our engineering crews had an extremely productive year, installing a record 73,000 concrete ties, exceeding the previous high of 42,000 installed in 2001. Our crews also installed more than 55 miles of new continuous welded rail, equaling nearly 28 miles of track that was replaced. Not only was this record amount of work completed, but it was done on time and on budget, often using continuous outages for cost efficiencies. In the aftermath of Tropical Storm Isaias, we restored service on our entire fleet in our entire territory in just 2 days. A testament to our managers and workforce for getting it done fast, efficiently, but most importantly, safely. There is a tremendous amount of work that is getting done and still needs to get done. I remain committed to monitoring these measures we have implemented and ensuring their success. All this work helps us not only run better service for our customers, but it reduces unplanned overtime expenditures as well. All of this has resulted in a decrease in overtime at the Long Island Railroad. Compared to 2018, we decreased our overtime spending by $19 million in 2019. In 2020, we continued to further reduce overtime spending by $13 million, a total of $32 million in savings from 2018. The proactive approach on the Long Island Railroad Forward is consistent with these goals. And in November, our on-time performance was a 95.18%. Improved on-time performance is the result of performing work in a planned, proactive manner, eliminating infrastructure incidents that have been repetitive, costly, and directly impacted our ridership. So as we better control and lower overtime expenditures, everything we've been doing to increase our performance also results in cost savings. Delays are down, incidents are down, our response times are quicker. All of that translates to finding ways to accomplish critical work more efficiently. One example, the laser train technology. Even without including December statistics, this innovation has reduced labor costs associated with wheel chewing by 38.4%, or a savings of $102,000 compared to 2019. And less chewing extends the wheel's lives. We estimate that for every year we gain saves us $500,000 in shop labor and material costs. And we had 266% less delays due to low adhesion this October, November compared to last year, and 473 or 79% less delays compared to 2018 before we had laser technology in use. It is paying for itself while reducing costs and improving safety and service. Doing things more efficiently and cost effectively is paramount to ensuring the best use of public dollars. And keeping our promises and delivering critical work brings me to positive train control. On December 5th, both Amtrak and Long Island Railroad successfully began running trains with PTC through Harold. With a few details to finalize, the finish line is right in front of us. I want to thank the board for your support, the consortium, our positive train control team led by Debbie Chin and Andrew Arendt, and the Long Island Railroad workforce for their diligence in ensuring this project meets the FRA deadline amidst a global pandemic. In closing, this has arguably been a difficult year in our history. Recent events have added to that as we remain committed to find ways to deliver safe, reliable, and essential service. But despite it all, I'm thankful for all that we have been able to deliver and remain committed to continuous improvement. I'm proud to be working side by side with my colleagues at Long Island Railroad and MTA. I wish for this holiday season is that everyone finds a safe way to enjoy this time of year as we deal with the second wave of COVID across this country. Let's all watch out for each other and have a safe and healthy holiday season and a good start to 2021. I wish happy holidays to everyone and their families. Thank you. I could take questions, and then we have 2 procurements this month.
Hey, Pat, it's Kevin.
Kevin.
Hey, you know what, the Long Island Railroad, Metro North, the MTA, we certainly get a share of bad press on loads of different issues. But I think we should all feel really good about the last item that Phil reported on, and that the positive train control is getting done on time, as required, by the end of this year. And I think the board should also feel good about the fact that we got engaged, we got involved, led by Neil Zuckerman and Larry and others, to get the vendors in, to let them know we were serious about budgets and deadlines. Old ways of doing things, of not really paying attention to budget and deadlines, were no longer acceptable. In fact, we even threatened debarment. So the board should feel good about the role it played, but Phil and Kathy and their teams really should be commended, because getting positive train control done by the deadline, I think, is a big accomplishment, especially during a global pandemic. Thank you.
Commissioner Mack.
Bill, congratulations. You did a wonderful job, and let's hope we can continue. Also, wish everybody a healthy, happy holiday. Keep up the good work. And I also concur with Kevin.
Thank you, Commissioner. Anybody else for Phil? Phil, why don't you take us through the 2 procurements, please?
Sure, thank you. And I appreciate those comments on behalf of the staff. We have 2 procurements this month, both non-competitive and both contract modifications. The first is with Frontier Industrial for a rail car decommissioning. It's a total value of $7,202,000. $4 million of this is for Long Island Railroad needs, $2.7 million for New York City Transit needs. And in the first year, we anticipate 60 cars being decommissioned, with a second year option for 80 cars. The second procurement is with Russell Reed Waste Holding for a rail car toilet servicing and vehicle maintenance. It's a 1-year extension to the base of $2.5 million for additional year at the same value.
Thank you, Phil. I'll make a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thanks. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed or abstentions? Thank you. The 2 procurements pass. Now I'll ask Kathy Rinaldi to report on Metro North. Kathy.
Thank you, Chairman Foy. I would like to start with our progress on PTC implementation since last month's meeting on several important fronts, which is reflected in the report on the agenda. On November 25th, Metro North received conditional approval from the Federal Railroad Administration of our PTC safety plan. Earlier this month, we successfully entered PTC operations on the New Haven line, thanks to the hard work of our team in bringing PTC software to the M8 electric cars. Our dedicated forces are continuing to upload the software on the remainder of our M8 fleet. We have also successfully achieved interoperability with Amtrak. We remain on track to reach the finish line on time and be at 100% PTC implementation by December 31st. This will be a huge achievement for MTA and Metro North, despite the unprecedented and catastrophic impacts of COVID-19 on our finances and on the PTC supply chain. I want to take a moment and thank the dedicated Metro North team for achieving these milestones. This team is Anish Gandhi, Dwight Soden, John Kesich, Dave Malillo, Dave Kubicek, Susan Sarch, Anthony Gardner, Tony Chifo, Donovan Evans, John Diptulski, John Longobardi, Chris Taft, Rashad Ramsey, Joe Lagana, Jim Heimbecker, Craig Gustafson, Maurice Divers, Raul Nair, Gerald Winters, Natasha Wilson, and Andrew George. This project spans several years, so there are some recent retirees who also were major contributors to this project. Anthony Forcina, Glenn Hayden, and Rich Gantz. Unfortunately, the heat is banging in the background as I'm going through my remarks. Timing is everything. Every step towards completion of PTC is evidence that we continue our commitment to the safety and reliability of our system. While we'll be operating full PTC as of the end of this year, the work won't come to an end on December 31st. PTC is a new way of operating for Metro North and all railroads, and will be focused on maintaining and upgrading this important safety enhancement system. Just a few words on service and ridership. In November, we continued to provide reduced schedule with operating 63% of our pre-COVID train service levels. Service delivery operated above goal at 94.7%, with year-to-date 3.6% better than last year. We operated well through slip slide season, which affects all railroads, as Phil already noticed, with our OTP 2.9% better than last year, and we had no issues with train car availability. West of Hudson service performed at 90.8% in November and stands at 94.7% year to date, which is well above last year's performance at this time of 89.8%. Now, ridership is down a little bit more than 81%. We're carrying about 19% of our pre-COVID ridership. As I reported last month, weekend ridership remains stronger than weekday ridership, but it has decreased a little bit as the weather has cooled down and the autumn leaves have fallen. Across the system, weekend ridership is down 68.5%, and we're serving 31.5% of our pre-COVID ridership levels. West of Hudson service ridership decreases have tracked closely with the East of Hudson ridership. Ridership counts indicate that West of Hudson service is down approximately 82%, carrying approximately 18% of pre-COVID levels. Now, a few words on COVID-19. After a summer and early fall that provided something of a respite from the horrors of the spring months, we are now in a second surge as winter approaches. Weeks went by this summer when we saw no additional positive cases at Metro North. But these days, like much of the region, we are seeing new cases almost every day from locations all around our territory. Despite the negative trends today, there's good reason to be hopeful about tomorrow. By almost every measure, we are better prepared for this challenge now than earlier in the year. Testing is more widely available, contact tracing protocols are in place, treatment is much improved, and we know which behaviors specifically spread the virus and how to control them. Our message to our customers and our employees is simple. We continue to do everything that we can to keep you safe. Whether it is our unprecedented program for disinfecting across train cars and at stations, providing hand sanitizer dispensers at all stations, distributing masks at key locations, or rolling out our PPE vending machines now at 23 stations and in Grand Central, we will continue to focus on and our employees. And we remind our customers to do their part. Even when social distancing, a face covering is mandatory on all our trains, and if customers do not have a face covering or mask, they should ask for one from the conductor. Equally important for our employees, we've enhanced cleaning at work locations. We provide COVID testing. We've deployed a temperature brigade at key employee locations, and we have different masks and face coverings for all employees to suit different types of working environment. I want to thank all of our employees for their tireless and heroic efforts during this incredibly challenging and unprecedented year. I appreciate their continued dedication to providing safe and reliable service, and I'm so proud of them. And I want to assure our customers that their health and safety is our #1 concern, and that we are going the extra mile to make sure that they have every protection that we can offer to make their travel safe, especially during this holiday season. On behalf of the entire Metro North family, I wish everyone a safe holiday and a healthy and happy New Year. Now on to our competitive procurement. There is one competitive procurement in this month's package totaling $334,873,148. Metro North, on behalf of itself, the Long Island Railroad, the Connecticut Department of Transportation, and the New York State Department of Transportation hereby request board approval to award a competitively solicited contract to the firm Siemens Mobility, Inc. in the total amount of $334,873,148. The award is for the design, manufacture, testing, and delivery of 19 dual-mode locomotives and related locomotive equipment, and for Metro North to exercise an initial option for 8 additional locomotives. Under this contract, Long Island, CDOT, and NYSDOT may elect to exercise option orders for additional locomotives as set forth in the price proposal. Exercise of Long Island Railroad's option would be subject to MTA Board subsequent approval. The contract is funded by an FTA grant. May I please have a vote for the procurement presented in the December package?
Thank you, Kathy. I will make the motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, good. Before we vote, any questions for Kathy on her presentation or on the procurement?
This is Rhonda. I would just like to say thank you to Kathy and the Metro North team for all that they did to complete the PTC on time, and especially during this unprecedented pandemic. The work that you guys did and the professionalism that you show all the time is greatly appreciated.
Thank you, Commissioner Herman.
I second and endorse Commissioner Herman's comment with respect to Metro North and Long Island Railroad. Great achievements. Anybody else with a question for Kathy before we vote?
Well, I'd like to applaud the PTC success too, except that I will say that it didn't surprise me in the least. I fully expected the Metro North and Long Island Railroad technological teams working with the vendors would bring the thing in on time. But, I didn't find it in any way surprising, and this is what I expect out of our engineering people.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown. Thank you, Commissioner Brown. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? The procurement carries. Next, Sarah Feinberg will deliver a report from New York City Transit and MTA Bus. Sarah, please.
Thanks, Pat. By the time we get to this portion of the meeting, I always feel like we're running behind, so I'll be brief and try to go through my remarks quickly. First, just a couple comments on the storm planning and response. You know, the storm is coming this afternoon, but has been there's been days of planning that have gone into this. It's just been a reminder of the caliber and excellence of the New York City Transit team. They've done this many times. They know what they're doing. They're ready to for anything that could come our way this afternoon and this evening. I want to thank Frank Jazeski and Craig Cipriano and their teams just for being so on top of it. You know, we're going to have a long day today and a long night tonight and a long day tomorrow. But, you know, we're all hands on deck for storms like this. So people have missed their RDOs. They're missing planned vacation days. They're working 12 and 16-hour shifts today. And so I'm so grateful for them and grateful to the public for paying attention to the forecast and staying home to the extent that they can and to the extent that they can't, thinking about their travel and planning it early. On COVID, just a couple of remarks. A couple of other folks have mentioned that our mask statistics are excellent. The last few days, 99% and 97% have a mask and 92% are wearing it correctly. That's, of course, still not at the 100% correct level that we would like, but we're getting there. And I'm grateful for all of the station agents who are continuing to hand out masks, the riding public who are being vigilant about their mask usage and are being respectful of others who are, even I saw someone hand out a mask the other day to someone who didn't have one. So I'm grateful for the patience and the vigilance of the public as well. I also want to thank and commend Pat Warren and the OHS team who continue to remain vigilant on the COVID front. They've set up testing programs for our workforce, which were not easy to stand up and have been executed near flawlessly, and are now doing everything they can to make sure that our folks are at the, as close to the front of the line as appropriate in terms of a vaccine. So I'm grateful for them too. I wanted to just comment a little bit. It may seem like it's not in my wheelhouse, but I wanted to just congratulate the commuter railroads on PTC implementation and installation. I've spent many years working on this issue. It feels like it has nothing to do with me now, but I spent many years working on this issue, and it's a safety technology that's close to my heart. And for all of the work and the headaches and the pain of taking something this significant, expensive and implementing it into everything that the commuter railroads are doing and doing it on time is such a huge lift. And it's a hard technology and accomplishment to explain, because the fact that it's been done well and implemented well means that we probably will never see what the alternative would have been. But having stood in a rail yard next to a derailed Amtrak train a few years ago, that was a PTC preventable accident. We and our ridership should be really grateful for the leadership of Phil Eng and Kathy Rinaldi, who got this done on time, and all of the members of their teams who executed so flawlessly. Just one comment on the service reductions in the budget. Mr. Chairman, I appreciate and I'm grateful for the way that you and Bob have gone about sorting the budget. Anything that we can do to avoid the dramatic service cuts that we've had to contemplate and the layoffs that we've had to contemplate should be done. This city and this workforce have paid such a high price already for COVID. And inevitably, if we have to do significant service reductions, even if they're just 20% service reductions versus the 40% service reductions we've talked about, the communities that have been hit hardest by COVID will inevitably be hit hardest by our service reductions too. So I continue to be grateful for everything that you and Bob and others have done to make sure that Washington understands our great need for this emergency assistance, and to make sure that we are providing DC and our congressional delegation with as much time and space as we can possibly give them to deliver that funding. In closing, I just want to acknowledge a couple of retirements and resignations. First, Barry Greenblatt, who many of you know is the head of service delivery at New York City Transit, has retired. I think his actual last day is December 31st, but he has some vacation. So he's actually already worked his last official day. He started as a bus operator, believe it or not, and served New York City Transit for 34 years and has just absolutely tremendous amounts of knowledge, and has been such a force for good at New York City Transit, such a huge figure, and has such a huge amount of institutional knowledge. And I cannot thank him enough for his service, particularly in the beginning of COVID when we were moving to essential service. His input and his brilliance were critical in getting us through that. And so we're certainly sorry to see him go, but very happy for him. And then finally, I just wanted to acknowledge that our colleague Polly Trottenberg has left New York City. I was thinking today about when I met Polly, and I actually believe it was in 2005 when I was, or maybe even 2004, when she was just the legislative director in Chuck Schumer's office. And I was nowhere near cool enough or smart enough to be associated with the legislative director in Chuck Schumer's office, but I knew someone in Schumer's office and was interviewing for a job in the communications department. And as I was being escorted through the office, Polly and her office were sort of pointed out to me with awe. And we just sort of looked at her through a window because she was such an awe-inspiring figure in the Senate. And I think that was about 17 years ago. And so to get to work with her then 10 years later at DOT was such a joy and an honor. And I've learned from her every step of the way. And then to get to work with her 5 years later here at MTA was a joy too. So I'm sorry for New York City that she's left and moved on to better, bigger things and more exciting things. But also, just grateful for the opportunity and hope that I can work with her again soon. But it's been a pleasure. And I want to turn to Craig Cipriano, who has a couple of remarks.
Thank you, Sarah. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to acknowledge George Medina, Bus's Vice President and Chief Facility Officer, as he retires at the end of this month. Similar to Barry Greenblatt, George dedicated 43 years of his life to New York City Transit, both in subways and buses, the last 21 years being with the Bus's family. We'll miss George. We wish him all the best. So please join me here today on behalf of the entire Bus's family in wishing George a very happy, well-deserved, and long retirement. Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks, Craig. Mr. Chairman, that is it from New York City Transit and MTA Bus.
Sarah, thanks for that presentation. Questions for Sarah? Good. I want to join your remarks about Commissioner Trottenberg. She is an incredible public servant and a rare talent, and she's going to be missed. Jana Lieber is now going to take us through C&D procurement items from the Transit and Bridge and Tunnels committees. Jana.
C&D has 3 procurement actions being brought through Transit and Bus Committee for approval this month. There are no non-competitive items, but there are 2 competitive items totaling $161.4 million. The first item requests board approval to award a competitively solicited design-build contract for accessibility upgrades at 8 stations spread throughout the 5 boroughs of New York City, and it's in the amount of $153.2 million, and we're awarding it to Judlow Contracting. More on that later. The contract includes the installation of 17 new elevators that will provide accessibility at each of the 8 stations. The second item, which is related, requests approval of the award of a linked 15-year contract for the maintenance of those new elevators to Modern Elevator Installations, Inc., and the contract's in the amount of $8.1 million. The design-build contract and the maintenance of the elevators were procured through a single solicitation. We specified that only the design builder's elevator manufacturer or installer could be eligible for the award of the maintenance contract. The goal here was to ensure that the design builder would work hand in glove with that elevator subcontractor to select and design the most robust equipment that would not only withstand the rigors of our New York City transit system, but would also create strong incentives for the elevator subcontractor to optimize the elevator design because they were going to be on the hook for a performance-based long-term maintenance contract. So this is a new approach to our elevator contracting and maintenance. Both Judlow and Modern, the partners, were ultimately unanimously selected for award based on their proposals offering the best overall value, considering technical strength of the proposals, lowest proposed costs, and reductions to schedule. And both of the pricing in both cases is well below our internal estimates. I just want to take a couple more moments to talk about this procurement, because it highlights some things that we are trying to get done. Recall that when we rolled out the capital program, the MTA received criticism for the amount of money we were assigning to accessibility improvements at individual stations, which was then estimated at roughly $70 million per station of the 70 stations that we were going to get done. This contract, total project cost, will deliver those 8 stations at roughly $41 million per station. That's 45% the average for the capital program, and it's also 20+% below our internal estimates. Once we had the scope for these station jobs, we did an internal estimate, and even in the bidding ultimately was 20% below that. So, we said that we were going to try to deliver the 70 stations at a lower cost than the capital program budgeted, and this reflects progress in that in that direction. How do we get it done? One is we really aggressively using the flexibilities provided by design build. We are doing less than 10% design on this and leaving the rest of the design to the JV design build team. But we are doing more invasive testing to make sure we know what conditions, utilities, and otherwise exist, so we have fewer surprises which lead to change orders. Second, we specified performance requirements, but left the specific technology up to the proposers. And the result was that the winning proposer used an innovative technology, machine room-less elevators, which take up less space and ultimately save on construction costs and material. Third, we got a shorter schedule. We competed schedule as a variable in this design build procurement, and we ended up with the stations on average taking 20 months rather than the 27 to 29 months we have seen in recent ADA projects on a station basis. And fourth, and a tip of the hat to Commissioner Schwartz, we adopted this procurement reflects the changes to our contracts that were recommended by the board staff cost containment working group, which did some work a year plus ago and recommended, among other things, that we get rid of our one-sided dispute resolution procedures and have a much more balanced risk-sharing model between us and contractors, including commitments to provide outages and the staff to support contractor work so they could be more sure of their schedule. So all of those things factored into the success here. We hope that, obviously this is 8 stations out of 70. It's way premature to declare victory, but there is some positive signs coming out of this. The execution obviously is what's key here, and we are actually hopeful of realizing even more savings. We've incentivized the contractor quite strongly to cut schedule. That has the result, if we achieve it, of reducing our in-house costs. We are an expensive supervisor and manager of construction for lots of reasons we're trying to address. If we can shorten projects, we'll keep our in-house costs down and obviously give the public the benefit. So that's all on that one ADA 8 stations contract. Second item is there's a ratification this month requesting that the board approve a retroactive mod or change order for a 9-month extension to an on-call contract with Sovereign Hydroseal for water remediation services. This is an on-call contract we use a lot in all the projects for dealing with water penetration. And we want to extend it in a not-to-exceed amount of $2.2 million. This mod, as I said, will allow for continued water remediation services as required until a successor contract is awarded. This is the dominant actor in that area of water remediation. We're trying to get more competition into this area and more to follow. So I submit these 2 procurement actions with apologies for going on a bit to the board for approval.
Thank you, Jano. Any questions for Jano on his presentation? Commissioner Khaleesi.
Thank you, Jano. One thing that in government is when you hear change order, it's a bad word. So thanks for just trying to stop that from happening. And thank you, Commissioner Schwartz, for putting some innovative ideas forward. Certainly moving forward on this accessibility thing and forcing companies to think about innovative ways to improve elevators and reliability is a great thing. Thank you for your support on this, Jano. Moving things forward. Would love to see more of this happen in the future, and this is certainly the right way to go, cutting costs, getting more elevators in a timely manner. So thank you, and I'm here to support this in any way, shape, or form.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other questions or comments for Jano? With that, I'll make the motion to approve these procurements. Do I have a second?
I second, Pat.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed or abstentions? Procurements carry. Thanks. Jano.
Okay, I'm going to go speedy through the next couple. We have 2 procurement actions brought through the Bridges and Tunnels Committee this month. There are no non-competitive items. There are 2 competitive items totaling $9.8 million. The first is modification to an existing contract with Ammon & Whitney and WSP, a joint venture for additional design services for prototype barrier fabrication, crash, and wind tunnel testing and stringer repairs at the RFK Bridge, Triborough, in the amount of $2.8 million. I just want to highlight that we have stripped this contract down to some services that we needed immediately, and we're going to procure the balance of some of the work that's being done by Ammon & Whitney competitively. That was a decision that I made recently to sort of narrow the scope of this. The second item is for a modification to an existing contract with Ahern Painting Contractors for additional painting at the Verrazano Narrows Bridge in the amount of $6.98 million. Progressing this work as a mod will allow C&D to take advantage of the contractor's existing work platform already up, which will provide considerable savings over a separate solicitation. I submit these procurement actions to the board for your approval.
Thanks, Jano. Any questions on these procurement actions?
Second.
I'll make a motion to approve. Commissioner Mack, second. All in favor? Aye. Thank you. Any opposed or abstentions? Procurement carries. Thanks, Jano. Now we're going to hear from Danny DiCrescenzo with respect to bridges and tunnels. Danny.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to start with, as we continue to see coronavirus cases rise, there's no higher priority to MTA Bridges and Tunnels than the safety and health of its employees. We are applying all the lessons we have learned since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic to help keep new cases at a minimum during the second wave. Aggressive employee screening, testing, contact tracing, and cleaning are key elements of our strategy, along with reinforcing the practices of wearing masks, maintaining social distance, and hand washing and/or using hand sanitizers. As our signs say at the facilities, what we have in place will slow the pace, and we're going to continue to try to keep the well. Operationally, there were two major customer enhancements to B&T facilities completed in the past month. At the RFK Bridge, C&D opened the new connector ramp from the R.F. Kennedy Bridge's Manhattan span to the northbound Harlem River Drive ramp. This connector ramp is a long time missing link for northbound motorists who can now bypass the city streets in East Harlem and access the Harlem River Drive directly. This reduces local traffic and congestions and lowers vehicle emissions. At the Verrazano Bridge, an important stage of the facility's roadway deck reconstruction project was completed. The new roadway deck provides better access to the bridge's upper level from the Gowanus Expressway towards Staten Island and will provide for a smoother ride and reduce maintenance costs in the future. The new RFK connector ramp and the VN approach ramp underscore the MTA's commitment in investing in our facilities so we can better serve customers now and for many years to come. Thanks to the collective efforts of C&D, with a shout out to Chief Engineer Joe Keene, the RFK and VN engineering and management teams. Good job, all. And if I may, I would like to acknowledge the contributions of two longtime employees upon their retirement from B&T, Patrick J. Parisi and Dory Abrams. Patrick Parisi, the Vice President of Maintenance and Operations Support, represents the third generation of his family to dedicate their careers to B&T service. After being hired as a maintainer in 1986, Pat joined management in 1992 and excelled in ever-increasing leadership roles that were essential in improving B&T's performance. His career highlights include the complete reorganization of the maintenance department, as well as his efforts during B&T's response to crises such as 9/11, Hurricane Sandy, and the recent COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you, Pat, for your dedication and hard work. You'll be missed. Dory Abrams, B&T's acting vice president and chief financial officer, was hired in 2000 as a revenue analyst in the planning and budget department after working in the New York City Office of Management and Budget. He has a major role in guiding B&T's finances and since then resulted in over $10 billion of financial support to MTA mass transit agencies. His financial knowledge will be missed almost as much as his good nature. Dory, thank you for your service. And everyone at B&T wishes both you and Pat a happy and healthy retirement. Finally, as the year comes to an end, I would like to thank all B&T employees for their extraordinary work during these unprecedented times, including their work as we prepare for the snowstorm this afternoon. With that, if there's no questions, I wish all a healthy, safe, and happy holiday season. There are no B&T board procurements this month. This concludes my comments.
Danny, thanks for the presentation. Any questions for Danny?
Oh, I'd like to give Danny a compliment on the
Commissioner, I think you muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, Commissioner.
I'd like to thank Danny for his leadership and while he was acting and currently in a current position. Danny, good luck for you and your team. Happy holidays and keep up the good work.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Amen. Anybody else? All right. Thank you, Danny. We're going to turn next to the Finance Committee. I'm going to call on Pat McCoy to introduce the finance action items. Pat.
Thank you, Chairman Foy. The Finance Committee work plan calls for the Finance Department to submit for board approval in each December the estimated borrowing needs for the coming year. So in your packet today, there are 3 related staff multiple resolutions which are found in the exhibit book on the web. The resolutions authorize the issuance of debt obligations in 2021 to meet bond of existing approved capital programs, principally the 2015 to 2019 and earlier programs. The staff summaries appear in the main book and the resolutions appear in the exhibit book. The first staff summary provides for the issuance of up to $2 billion for transit and commuter projects and $500 million of bands or bonds for TBTA projects. The second staff summary provides a delegation of the board to undertake refundings from time to time to capture favorable market environments for refunding of existing obligations that meet the board approved refunding guidelines. And those guidelines are attached to the staff summary for your reference. The third staff summary and associated resolutions provide for the reimbursement of expenditures with tax-exempt bond proceeds. There's an additional fourth staff summary today that's seeking board authorization of the underwriting syndicate that will be used for the issuance of bands or bonds or other debt obligations on a negotiated basis. The recommendations are being made in connection with the request for proposals from firms seeking to provide underwriting services to the MTA. The RFP was issued on March 5th and proposals were due by August 28th. We received 42 proposals, 21 of which were seeking the role of senior manager. The staff summary recommends the following firms to be eligible to serve as senior or co-managers as follows. The senior manager pool includes Bank of America Securities, Goldman Sachs and Company, JP Morgan Securities, LLC, Jefferies, LLC, Ramirez & Co., Inc., and Siebert Williams Shank. And that staff summary incorrectly identifies the firm as Siebert Cisneros Shank, so it's Siebert Williams Shank. The co-manager pool includes the following 15 firms: Academy Securities, Barclays Capital, Blaylock Van, Citigroup Global Markets, Drexel Hamilton, Loop Capital Markets, Mishler Financial Markets, Morgan Stanley & Co., PNC Capital Markets, Oppenheimer & Co., RBC Capital Markets, Raymond James & Associates, Rice Financial Products Company, Stern Brothers & Co., and UBS Financial Services. In addition to this group, I won't read the names, but we are also recommending a selling group comprising the remaining 21 firms, and that's in the staff summary. As the staff summary notes, adoption of the underwriting recommendations will support and continue MTA's successful utilization of minority and women-owned firms and service-disabled veteran-owned businesses. The pool of 6 senior managers recommended includes both a minority firm and a woman-owned firm, achieving a 33% participation rate. The co-manager pool of 15 firms includes 1 woman-owned firm, 3 minority-owned firms, and 3 disabled veteran-owned firms for a 46% participation rate. The combined senior manager and co-manager groups recommended herein includes 43% minority and women or service-disabled veteran-owned certified firms. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions on these staff summaries.
Questions for Pat McCoy. I do want to note the extraordinary performance with respect to MWBE and service-disabled veterans firms. Pat and his team, working with Michael Gardner and others, have really been committed to this, and it shows in the results. So thank you, Pat. Any questions for Pat? Thank you. I'll make a motion to approve. Can I have a second, please? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed or abstentions? Thank you. The actions carry. I'm going to call on David Florio to take us through the real estate items. David.
Pat?
Yes, I'm sorry. Randy, forgive me.
Before we move to the real estate, in several of the virtual hearings about fare increases that I attended, there were numerous of the public speakers who complained about people evading the fares. I see our transit people have dropped out of this. At least that's what it looks like to me. And the few occasions I've been on the subway, I've seen people abusing the. And I'll yield my time to Andrew, who is more of an expert at that. But I really think something needs to be done, and I don't know why they're not here to hear our comments.
Well, Andrew, the MTA police and the NYPD were on for the entire meeting. They've committed to do that. We will call on them on that issue going forward. Sarah, do you want to speak to this?
Sure, I'm happy to. I mean, look, it's an ongoing issue, but the MTA police and the NYPD have been working closely on it, and even closer on it the last few months, I think, than previously. Chief O'Reilly has been very engaged, Inspector Porteous and Chief Styler and Chief McGran. So, Randy, if Commissioner Glucksman, if you've got some specific questions or concerns, I'm happy to engage with you one-on-one or set up a meeting between you and myself. And
actually, Commissioner Albert is the expert because he sees it.
President Feinberg, you won't believe the extent that some folks are going to now to disable and keep slam gates open. I actually had to repair one of the bolsters on top of the slam gate. Somebody had knocked it off and was putting it in the way so the gate wouldn't close. I actually climbed up and repaired it myself and reported it to the transit police. But it's crazy.
Okay, well, my advice to all commissioners is to be careful when you're repairing your own slam gate. But thank you for doing that, Commissioner Albert. We have been undertaking an audit of all of the slam gates to check for how, if any of them need repairs. And so we are going through all of them.
That's good. Some of them don't actually lock all the way either.
That's one of the reasons why we've been going through an audit. It's just general good housekeeping.
Thank you.
I yield back my time. Thank you. And also,
thank you, Randy. David, back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Real estate has 3 action items for consideration and approval. The Long Island Railroad has 2 action items. The first authorizes relocation of an emergency service facility on the West Side Yard to accommodate a potential Amtrak project on the West Side Storage Yard in the future. The second item is a permit agreement with the Celebrations Association of Forest Hills Gardens for a seasonal display at the Forest Hills Station. New York City Transit has 1 action item. It is a license agreement with New Jersey Transit for antenna and support facilities in Kearney, New Jersey. There is, in addition, Mr. Chairman, 1 information item. I'm happy to answer any questions regarding any of the foregoing.
Thank you, David. Any questions for David?
I have one question. David, why, unless we're talking about the Staten Island Express buses that probably use a portion of the New Jersey Turnpike, why would we need an antenna location in Kearney, New Jersey?
I'm going to defer to Craig Cipriano, but we do have operations there.
Oh, yes. Yep. Andrew, you're right. That's part of the reason why we need it in Jersey for those express buses that go through New Jersey.
Had to be that. Okay.
Also what we've learned in years past is, we do send our buses to help, up north and in, sometimes in New Jersey and out east. So, we were looking to build that into this new radio system, that ability. But yes, that's for New Jersey Transit, the Staten Island Express. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions for David? I'll make the motion to approve the real estate items. Can I have a second, please?
Yes. Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed or abstentions? Thank you. The real estate items carry. I'm going to call on Lamont Kirsch to now address the items on the Corporate Governance Committee agenda this month. Lamont.
Thank you. This month's corporate governance book has 2 items for your review. First is the committee's 2021 draft work plan. Second, each year this committee is required to review the MTA's board's bylaws, board committee charters, governance guidelines, and codes of ethics, which are in your committee book. We have no recommended changes at this time. In addition, I have 1 item for the board approval. Public Authorities Law Section 2824 requires the board to adopt certain policies, which have been provided in the exhibit book containing 1 policy for your review and approval.
Thanks, Lamond. Any questions for Lamond on these matters? I'll make the motion to approve the policy. Can I have a second, please?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. The item carries. I'm going to call on Michael Gardner now to present the Diversity Committee materials. Michael.
Good morning, Chairman and CEO Foy.
Morning.
Let me just state for the record that the MTA's MWBE program, or the state of the program, is strong. Last week, the Governor Andrew Cuomo announced his MWBE results from last year. The state of New York, with their 97 state agencies and authorities, paid a total of $3.1 billion to minority women-owned firms in 1 year, the highest in history, $3.1 billion. The MTA paid $772 million of that $3.1 billion, which equates to 25% of all dollars paid by the state of New York. Their 97 agencies and authorities came from this organization, and that's a direct result from the leadership of this board, the leadership of Chairman Foy, the leadership of the entire board, including Chairman Herman and MTA Finance Chair Larry Schwartz, who just reminded us last week of what the governor's expectations are when we award contracts out of this organization. The top 5, MTA, $772 million. Empire State Development Corporation, $529 million. New York State Office of OGS, $185 million. New York State Department of Financial Services, $185 million. And the Dormitory Authority of the State of New York, $184 million. By far, the MTA is ranked #1, and thank you for your support. Let me also just talk about where we are with respect to our MWBE. And so in addition to the $772 million, we also have the ability to award $304 million on our FTA funded projects. We do not get credit, but a dollar is a dollar. And so last year, the MTA was responsible for $1.1 billion in payments being made to New York State certified MWBEs, both on our New York State funded projects and our FTA funded projects, $1.1 billion. And I would also like to thank my very, very able staff, Dr. Rosalind Green, who leads and drives our EEO and Title VI initiatives, Ray Burke, who runs our MW, DBE, SDOV contract compliance, George Cleary, our award-winning small business mentoring program, Christine Norman at the BSC, and Zenaida Rodriguez, who is in charge of our MW, DBE outreach and integration of those firms into our processes. As our finance director just indicated, we have, this board has approved 43% of our investment banking syndicate are New York State certified MW and SDVOB firms, led under the outstanding leadership of CFO Bob Ferran, and his staff, the MTA at one given point in time was awarding or paying 59% of their investment banking fees to New York State certified investment bankers and SDVOB investment bankers. So thank you for your outstanding leadership. Let me also just highlight one recent contract that was awarded by a Metro North to a certified WBE black-owned firm in downtown Brooklyn who was on the verge of going out of business due to COVID-19. As a result of the leadership of President Rinaldi and her staff, Anthony Garner, Sherry Owens, and Michelle Davey, the MTA awarded a $5.5 million contract to this company. They have since increased their employees from 35 to more than 300. And so this organization, once again, is leading the way of creating opportunities in areas where they have often been excluded. Let me talk about our MWBE outreach initiatives. We are challenged by COVID-19, but the staff has not missed a step. They basically are holding virtual outreach events, and also we were a major player and a major part of Governor Andrew Cuomo's MWBE conference this year as an organization, and we got outstanding emails indicating that how our presentation was extremely informative. Let me talk about the DBE certification. We are in receipt of 26 new applications, and 21 firms have been certified during this COVID-19 period. Our EEO activities, we have 71,569 employees, 12,800 or 18% are females, 50,097 or 70% are members of ethnic minorities, and 1,981 are members of our veterans. Small Business Mentoring Program. We have been working with JANO's staff to make sure that our program is more than just written on paper. The governor has extended this program as a New York State law, and we are having continuous conversations of how this program is going to be effectively allocated projects so that our MWDBE subcontractors who normally under ordinary circumstances only have the ability to work as subcontractors are now receiving prime contracts. So in 10 years, there has been 427 contracts awarded to our firms in the mentor program, which totals 260 firms currently. They are in receipt of $446 million. And I am optimistic and convinced that between JANO and myself, we are going to ensure that this program sustains its excellence. And I would also like to give an example of our focus also in the areas of legal fees. In 2017, 4% of those legal fees were being paid to New York State certified MWBE firms. That number last year was increased to 19.6%. And we are not going to be satisfied until that number achieves or exceeds the governor's 30% MWBE in the area of legal fees. Mr. Chairman, that concludes my remarks. And once again, the MTA's MWDBE programs are extremely strong.
So, Michael, thank you for that presentation on impressive results. Thank you to your team for achieving it. Thanks to Chair Herman for her role in pushing it forward, as well as former Commissioner Susan Metzger, who also ought to get a tip of the hat. Any of my colleagues have questions for Michael? All right, great. Let me just make one further acknowledgement of a retirement. I want to acknowledge the retirement of Charles Glasgow, who's Deputy Chief of Employee and Labor Relations, for his 41 years of service to the MTA. Over the years, Charles spent the majority of his career at New York City Transit supporting labor relations for stations, car equipment, and Department of Buses. Charles joined headquarters in 2011 and has worked with Anita Miller and others on multiple initiatives, including IT consolidation, procurement, New York State MTA mentoring program, and too many collective bargaining agreements to count. We all want to thank Charles for his years of dedicated service and wish him and his wife well in a well-deserved retirement. With that, thank you, Charles. A virtual standing ovation. I will make a motion to approve the meeting. Do I have a second? Adjourned. All in favor? Thank you. The meeting's adjourned. Thank you all for your time and attention. Happy holidays to everybody.